And we are live. We're going to be reading the Two Towers today, starting with Book 4 of The Lord of the Rings, which is really exciting. Okay, just one moment. Oh, I didn't actually. Hey, Ted. Let me get the YouTube chat up. Here we are. Oh.
We are live.
Nope, that is not it. That's it. There we go. Okay. Wait a minute. Let's see. Moment. Oh, I didn't actually. Why do I sound like that? Is it using the wrong microphone? That seems to be fine. Hey, Ted. Why do I sound like that? Hey, Ted, do I sound strange to you? Let me continue to get the word out, and then I'm going to look at the audio situation. Hey Laurel, how's it going? And I see Dylan there. For the YouTube audience especially, let me know if the audio, if my voice sounds strange to you. I don't know. I could just be, hey Moogle. Well, of course the keyboard is, yeah, it seems to be something going on with the audio, right? It does sound a bit strange. Okay, let me see if I can look into this for a second here. Okay, it is picking up the proper microphone, so it's not like there's anything strange going on there. No, Ted is over on the Twitch side of things. Let's see.
Okay, let's see if that might have... I just made a slight alteration. Let me listen in on myself here.
Let me get the YouTube chat
up. We'll see if
there's anything strange going on there.
Let me refresh it because I feel like
Ted
that fixed it. Okay, all right. Yeah, that was weird. I made a little adjustment. I should sound fine now. Hey, Coyote, how's it going? Can I just get... Okay, everybody on Twitch is saying it's better. People on YouTube are saying it's better. There we go. You know what happened? I didn't think about this, but last night when I was shutting my computer down, it said that there was a Windows update, and I forgot about that. I just hit update and shut down, and I walked away, and I went to bed, and I didn't think about it till just now, but sometimes Windows Update will kind of screw with the audio settings on my microphone, so just one little click fixed it. But I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't just brought up the YouTube chat and listened to it for a second, and I was like, well, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound like me. That sounds like me through well, who said tin can? Somebody said tin can. Oh, that's what Ted said. Okay. Ted over on the Twitch side of things said tin can. So I have with me not one, but 2 bottles of water. Now, can anyone guess why I have brought 2 bottles of water with me instead of one? Normally, for a stream, I have a bottle of water, and then if I need another one, I will get up and get another one. But I have decided today that I 100% absolutely need 2 bottles of water. Can anyone guess why? Why I need that today? If you think back to where we left off, and then you think about where we're headed, in the Two Towers. It's not a very difficult guess, to be honest with you, if you were here last time. It's a very special occasion. Every stream is a special occasion for me, I think. It's not that, no. Okay. Well, here, I'll give you a hint. To remind you guys where we left off, we finished Book 3 of The Lord of the Rings, which is 6 parts, and we're starting Book 4, which is the second half of the Two Towers. Now can you guess why I had to have extra water? I know you guys can get this. I'm going to get started already. Yeah. Coyote, you're correct. It's because we're going to have to do the Gollum voice today. Because the first chapter that we'll be reading is The Taming of Smeagol. You know, somebody asked me, oh man, this was, I just remembered this just now. Somebody asked me, and this was during the period that I didn't have a computer, and I don't remember whether it was on YouTube or whether it was on Quora, but I remember seeing the alert on my phone, and they asked me about Smeagol's name. And really it was, is the accent on the E in Smeagol really necessary? And and that's sort of like my kind of question, right? I didn't get the chance to answer it, and I think I had looked for it and I couldn't find it. Like I said, it might have just been a comment or something on most likely on a Quora post, because those are the hardest things to track down. YouTube stuff is very easy to track down. But Scottish Maiden, I would love to see her. She's a big Gollum fan. As a matter of fact, she has Gollum as one of her emotes, you know. But anyway, it's interesting because I had a discussion with Matt once, and yeah, my copy of The Lord of the Rings, by the way, has a little misprint, whereas every page, you know, on the left side, the header says the Two Towers, and on the right side it says whatever chapter you're reading, and it always says The Taming of Smeagol. I could see it there on page 211 and page 213. But then on page 215, the accent is missing, which is sort of interesting. So there's a little misprint there. There's a few misprints in this old The Lord of the Rings. But anyway, the accent is interesting. I had a discussion with Matt about it, and he said, well, you know, doesn't that mean that it should be Smeagol? And because doesn't the accent mean that the E is its own syllable? And I said, well, no, that would be more of a two dots situation, sort of as you see in Feanor. The Smeagol, the accent is so you don't say Smeagol. So you say Smeagol, and Tolkien himself always said Smeagol, and then Matt countered with, but doesn't S-M-E-A, you know, that doesn't follow the you know what it says in the pronunciation guide in The Lord of the Rings or in the Silmarillion. So how does he wind up with Smeagol? And I said, well, the pronunciation guide is for Elvish, you know, so Smeagol's not an Elvish name. Not Smeagol? Smeagol? I'm sure he's been called worse things like that, like calling him Gollum. Now, let me show you guys what I got here for my birthday. Well, what I got for my birthday was actually a gift card, but let me show you what I bought with the gift card. So, actually, anybody who's on the YouTube side that is a channel member who saw the new episode 133 has already seen this, and I've read from it a bit, but let me go over to here. So I got myself the new version of the Letters of J.R.R. Tolkien, which has a lot of new letters in it. It's the revised and expanded edition. They keep the numbering system intact, which is really important for those of us who cite the letters. But oh, praise Eru. But yeah, quite the big book there, huh? New book, exactly. New book process. Yes, it's quite the big book. Here, let me hold it up again. As you can see, he wrote a lot of letters, and in the original version of this, there were 300 somewhat odd letters. Now there's a lot more. And there's quite an expansive index, which is really cool if you don't have a searchable PDF of it. But, you know, this is about 700 pages long. Yeah, 708 pages. You know, and a lot of new content. In the new episode of Q&A, episode 133, which went out yesterday for channel members, and will be live next Wednesday for everybody else who's not a channel member. Right now, it's really cool because this is really cool. Everybody that I see in the YouTube chat right now is a channel member. I see Gandalf's G-rune everywhere, and some people have little symbols, like little moons and suns there next to it as well, because it does evolve over time. By the way, we hit 25 members. No, wait, I'm sorry, it was 24. 24 members. I remember because it was divisible by 3, and I was like, okay, 8, and 8 for the end card. But anyway, that's really cool, you know, having that many members. And you know, the views have been climbing up. Oh, I love the little Silmaril. Yeah, there it is. But anyway, yeah, I read a few of the letters in that episode that were not part of the original. And the way that it worked was that if there was a letter, I mean, they're still presented in chronological fashion. So if there's a letter that's between 166 and 167, in which case there are 2 letters between those two, it's 166A, 166B. That way, when I say, oh, you should read letter 131, which, by the way, you should, it's one of his best letters, it's not going to be something different than what it used to be. Let's see if I can fix my mouse here, because it's not behaving correctly in terms of the lighting. There we go, we got it. Okay, I fixed it. So anyway, guys, we are going to be reading The Two Towers today, and how are you all doing? Are you all having a wonderful day? I hope so. You know, compared to the letters of J.R.R. Tolkien, The Two Towers is quite the slim volume. It's pretty short, all things considered, but we have to stop quite a lot to take our time and to carefully analyze the text and explain the lore and everything. And where we left off last time was the Palantir. That was the last chapter we did, and this was, I think, the most important event in the Lord of the Rings, in the entirety of the Lord of the Rings, all 6 books, all 1,200 pages of it. The most important event was Pippin picking up that crystal ball, the Palantir, and looking into it. And quite accidentally, not knowing what he had, not knowing what it was or the consequences of it to his own self, his safety, and even his sanity, although he came out of it okay, that was something that, you know, that's on the table when you look into a Palantir, and Sauron is on the other side, and he accidentally contacts Sauron and has a sort of a one-way conversation with him, or Sauron sort of grills him. Well, he does say that he's a hobbit. There is that. So I guess he did have a conversation with Sauron. He is the only character in the Lord of the Rings. Pippin Took is the only character in the Lord of the Rings that speaks to the Lord of the Rings. There are other implied conversations, the biggest one of which would be, Aragorn didn't speak to him. And Sauron did not speak to Aragorn. So the biggest one of the implied conversations would be Gollum, and we're going to learn about that today probably, where Gollum was tortured and interrogated by him. And what's interesting is that, and we're going to see this as we go forward, Gollum knows way more than you would think about everything, about the nature of the One Ring, about Sauron himself, about Mordor, and about history, too. Which is interesting because, you know, he is about 600 years old, right? He's not a spring chicken. He's very, very old for a hobbit. We don't know how old he really is, And the reason that I say that we don't know Gollum's exact age is because we don't know how old he was when he, his friend Deagle found the One Ring, and then he murdered Deagle and took the One Ring with him. We know how long he had it, but we don't know, we don't have a date of birth for Smeagol, so we really don't know how old he was. I figure he's a pretty young guy. Maybe someone in his 20s. What Tolkien would have referred to as a tween. And for those of you who don't know, the word tween was in fact invented by J.R.R. Tolkien, because it's sort of a triple meaning, tween, right? It refers to the irresponsible years of an adolescent hobbit when they're in their 20s, because they sort of come of age when they're 33 years old. So it's a mixture of teen, which is the sort of attitude that they have, and 20, but also they're in between. That's the third part of it. In between adulthood and childhood. And it's really interesting. I was just responding to a comment on YouTube just a little while ago about a question that I answered not very long ago about elvish parenting, and whether or not an elf who has a child that is, say, a few thousand years old, do they treat them as a full adult, or are they like people where they, no matter how old their kid is, they're still going to kind of treat them like a kid, right? You didn't know that. It's interesting. He did invent the word tween. The word tween comes from him. Now, it's used in a completely different fashion today, where we're referring to kids who are not quite young children, but they're not teenagers yet. That age of around 9 to 12, we refer to those as tweens. But it still fits between two things. And WT is right. Tolkien invented quite a few words. Eucatastrophe is a constructed word that he came up with. And what he was doing with the word eucatastrophe was he was sort of taking the word catastrophe back, because it used to mean, catastrophe used to mean any sort of major change. And it could be a good thing, or it could be a bad thing. And there was sort of this term of a malcatastrophe, which is a catastrophe that is bad, a malcatastrophe. But Tolkien saw over time the word evolve to only mean something bad. So the word malcatastrophe stopped being used, and everybody just referred to catastrophe as being something that was absolutely terrible, a negative quantity. And he thought there should be these moments of great change that inspire euphoria in the reader, and that's where the eu comes from, euphoria. And so he coined the term eucatastrophe. There are a few other words that he either created or constructed. In the case of Hobbit, it's a little contentious because people have found the word Hobbit in older texts, but they didn't have anything like the same meaning. They weren't referring to anything remotely human. And some of those sources are also a little bit sketchy. So orc is another one. When he came up with orc, a lot of people thought, well, that's something like a whale, right? Like orca. And there's even a note in The Hobbit, in the foreword, where it says orc is the Hobbit term for a goblin, and it has nothing to do with whales or dolphins or anything like that, And some people have found, old etymologies of using the word orc to describe a demon, but even that doesn't really fit what he's talking about, So it's a word that was around, but he gave it an entirely new meaning, which I think actually counts as inventing a word by giving a word a new meaning. Because when you think about it, it's not so much that a a word has multiple meanings. It's that there are multiple words that are spelled and pronounced the same way. You know? Your larder has been pilfered. Oh, Coyote. I saw your comment before I went on my post on YouTube where I said, hey, reminder, I'll be streaming doing the Two Towers. And Coyote comes in and says, I'll put out a few cakes. And I was going to reply, seed cake. But then I thought, I've never even had seed cake. I don't know if I would like it or not. But I thought, that's what I thought. But, hey, let me ask you guys a question. And I know we talked about this just a little bit when we read The Hobbit, but there was a theory, and I think there's something to this. There's nothing that Tolkien ever spoke about. But, hey, CW Train, how's it going? There's a theory that the reason that the dwarves in The Hobbit, in the first chapter, were so greedy with the amount of food that they ate, because they just kept eating and eating and eating and eating, and then in the morning, the breakfast was, and some of the idea that was that Gandalf told them to do that. He says, hey, look, we're going to yank this guy away from his home, and he's got like a restaurant set up back there. His larder is so well packed. If we don't empty out this guy's larder, when he gets home, his house is going to smell so bad. And, never mind how bad that would be. Keep in mind, there's no refrigeration. Everything is preserved in barrels and such. And the perishables are something that, he would be going through every day. So all the stuff, especially, like the meats and the cheeses and stuff, that would have all spoiled. And then just imagine, in an underground house, how bad the odor might have been. At least in the case of Frodo. See, Frodo knew that he was going to be leaving, so he sold Bag End, and then he didn't even really fully move into the new house. He had his friend Frodogar Bolger sitting there, so there was probably food there, but somebody was living in his house taking care of it. He had a caretaker, so nobody would think, hey, that Frodo guy, he's legally dead. We could take all this stuff, right? But I'm curious what you guys think of that theory. I've always thought that there could definitely be some truth to that. That was like sort of a favor that Gandalf was doing for them. And, I can imagine one of the dwarves like probably Gloin saying, well, why should we do him any favors? And then Gandalf will say, are you telling me that you don't want a free meal? I said, well, okay, all right, But the line that always sticks with me is Thorin, who's so arrogant and so self-important, saying, I like 6 eggs with my ham, and mind you don't break them. It's like 6 eggs with your ham. That's quite a lot. I don't think I've ever ate 6 eggs in one go, right? Probably had a band of... Yeah, well, a band of dwarves coming through. That's rough. But you know what? Maybe this is meaning that Coyote's going to go off on a grand adventure. And he's going to be gone for a while, and then he's going to come back a little bit different with some strange songs and stories and some wild tales that we won't believe. And he's going to have a lot of money. Okay, guys. Let's get started here. Let me get ourselves over to the Two Towers scene. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the music because we don't need that. That was just to have something in my ear while we set up here. So, welcome back to our reading of the Two Towers. Anybody who I think every single person here has been to one of these, right? I don't think anybody's not been to one of these before. But if you have never been to one of these before, we are reading the entirety of The Lord of the Rings. We are currently going on to book 4. And if you're thinking, well, there's only 3 books, right? Well, no, there's 3 volumes, which are called The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. But if you have The Two Towers here, and you open it up, it says The Two Towers, and then you get to page 13 here. And the first thing it says is book 3, because each part is broken into 2 books. That's why there's 2 chapter 1s and such. And the reason behind that is actually Tolkien saw The Lord of the Rings as one book. It's just one work. It's one thing, a 1,200-page book. And, this, you have to keep in mind that when he started writing it, it was the 1930s, but when he's coming close to finishing it, and he is dividing it into 6 parts, but he is considering it to be one book. It's, now post-World War II. It's in the early 50s when he's, coming down to the wire, making all of his last-minute additions, cramming Arwen into the book, changing Strider to Trotter, and believe it or not, that was even when Aragorn was fully realized as a character, that nickname Trotter was still there, and then he changed it to Strider almost at the last minute. And getting it published and working on the appendixes and everything. And it's post-World War II, and there's all these crazy shortages and whatnot. And his publisher says, we can't really just mass produce a 1,200-page book right now. Let's break it up into smaller parts. And Tolkien says, well, I kind of already have it in 6 parts, so why don't we publish it in 6 parts? And his publisher was like, well, how about 3, I mean, we don't want them to be too small, because then people will think, why is it shorter than The Hobbit, So we're starting book 4. And I explained last time why I felt that Pippin looking into the Palantir was the linchpin of the entire book, the most important event. I explained all that. It happens exactly halfway through at the end of part 3. Now, the way that the Two Towers is, if you've seen the film, the book can be very surprising, because the way that the film was... Well, The Two Towers is interesting because it starts off in this awkward phase where, Boromir has already died. Hey there, kits. Another live stream indeed. And that's interesting because the whole part with Boromir dying, as you guys know, was in The Two Towers, the book. So the Fellowship of the Ring sort of ended, the movie version sort of ended with the first part of The Two Towers. And then if you watch the film version of The Two Towers, you're like, well, they didn't get to Shelob and all that. What happened, and that's, not only is that in The Return of the King, but it's sort of halfway into the movie. And the reason that they did that, well, there's a few reasons, but the main reason why The Two Towers winds up stretched across all 3 films is because Peter Jackson wanted to show the events that were happening in chronological order. And that's why you would have a scene with Frodo and Sam, and then you would skip over to Merry and Pippin, and then it would go over to Aragorn and such, right? So we were seeing everything in this linear fashion. Whereas, you guys, we read through the entirety of book 3, and that almost exclusively, not quite almost exclusively, but almost exclusively followed Merry and Pippin. It starts with Merry and Pippin. It backtracks a little bit to Aragorn, and then they all come together, and then it sort of goes from there. Hey, Tommy. Now, and I've mentioned this a few times, that book 3 and book 4, the 2 halves that make up The Two Towers, are in fact happening simultaneously. And we're going to see this in book 4, that at certain points, it is going to tell us where in the timeline we are, what is happening in book 3, so that you can kind of understand that when everything is taking place, really. So what really it comes down to is it's sort of like Pulp Fiction in a way, where we have all these different events that take place at different times, and you sort of have to piece it together. It's not as complex as that, because that jumped all over the place. But really what we're doing is we're going back to what happened at the end of Book 2, concentrating not so much on what happened to Boromir, but concentrating really on what happens when Frodo and Sam leaves. They leave. Frodo decided that he cannot be around other people with the ring, because the ring drove Boromir insane. And he doesn't even know what happened to Boromir. He's going to find out, but he doesn't know at this point. He just knows that if he continues to travel with other people while holding the One Ring, it could happen again. Somebody else could turn on him, not because that they're evil or anything like that, but because the ring is that tempting and it does not wish to be destroyed. And then, of course, we know that Sam has this attitude of course you're going alone, and I'm going with you, because there's no place that Frodo is going to go that Sam is not going to follow him. Not even the Undying Lands, as we'll learn later. I mean, and that's kind of crazy, because Sam didn't follow him immediately to the Undying Lands. It took about 60 years for him to leave, but he always had that in the back of his head that he was going to follow Frodo to the Undying Lands. So here we go. We're going to start here, Book 4, Chapter 1, The Taming of Smeagol. I didn't make a batch of Gollum juice. I thought about it, but I didn't. So I have extra water. "Well, master, we're in a fix and no mistake," said Sam Gamgee. He stood despondently with hunched shoulders beside Frodo, and peered out with puckered eyes into the gloom. It was the third evening since they had fled from the company. As far as they could tell, they had almost lost count of the hours during which they had climbed and laboured among the barren slopes and stones of the Emyn Muil, sometimes retracing their steps because they could find no way forward, sometimes discovering that they had wandered in a circle back to where they had been hours before. Yet on the whole, they had worked steadily eastward, keeping as near as they could find away to the outer edge of this strange, twisted knot of hills. But always they found its outward faces sheer, high and impassable, frowning over the plain below. Beyond its tumbled skirts lay livid festering marshes, where nothing moved, and not even a bird was to be seen. The hobbits stood now on the brink of a tall cliff, bare and bleak, its feet wrapped in mist, and behind them rose the broken highlands crowned with drifting cloud. A chill wind blew from the east. Night was gathering over the shapeless lands before them. The sickly green of them was fading to a sullen brown. Far away to the right, the Anduin, that had gleamed fitfully in sunbreaks during the day, was now hidden in shadow. But their eyes did not look beyond the river, back to Gondor, to their friends, to the lands of men. South and east they stared to where, at the edge of the oncoming night, a dark line hung, like distant mountains of motionless smoke. Every now and again a tiny red gleam, far away, flickered upward in the rim of the earth and sky. "What a fix," said Sam. "There's the one place in all the lands we've ever heard of that we don't want to see any closer, and that's the one place we're trying to get to. And that's just where we can't get nohow. We've come the wrong way altogether, seemingly. We can't get down, and if we did get down, we'd find all the green land a nasty bog, I'll warrant. Phew, can you smell it?" He sniffed at the wind. "Yes, I can smell it," said Frodo, but he did not move, and his eyes remained fixed, staring out toward the dark line and the flickering flame. "Mordor," he muttered under his breath. "If I must go there, I wish I could come there quickly and make an end." He shuddered. The wind was chilly and yet heavy with an odor of cold decay. "Well," he said, at last withdrawing his eyes, "we cannot stay here all night, fix or no fix. We must find a more sheltered spot and camp once more, and perhaps another day will show us a path." "Or another and another and another," muttered Sam. "Or maybe no day. We've come the wrong way." "I wonder," said Frodo. "It's my doom, I think, to go to that shadow yonder. So that a way will find. Oh, so try. So that a way will be found. But will good or evil show it to me? What hope we had was in speed. Delay plays into the enemy's hands, and here I am, delayed. Is it the will of the Dark Tower that steers us? All my choices have proved ill. I should have left the company long before, and come down from the north, east of the river, and of the Emyn Muil, and so over the hard battle plain to the passes of Mordor. But now it is possible. Now it isn't possible for you and me alone to find a way back, and the orcs are prowling on the east bank. Every day that passes is a precious day lost. I am tired, Sam. I don't know what is to be done. What food have we got left? Only those, what do you call them? Lembas, Mr. Frodo. A fair supply. But they are better than naught and by a long bite. I never thought, though, when I first set tooth in them, that I should ever come to wish for a change. But I do now. A bit of plain bread and a mug, aye? And half a mug of beer would go down proper. I've lugged all my cooking gear all the way from the last camp. And what use has it been? Not to make a fire with for a start, and not to cook, not even grass. Let me just pause here. You wonder if Sam's wife knew that he was going to leave. He isn't married yet. He had a girlfriend named Rosie, and what happens when... Oh, wait, are you talking about the Undying Lands? Oh, I think you're talking about the Undying Lands, actually. Never mind all that. In that case, the answer would be yes. She knew. And I'll tell you why. Because he didn't go until she died. So, in that case, I think that she knew that he gave her the best years of his life and 13 children, and he was a really important guy in the Shire, being the mayor for nearly 50 years and all that. But yeah, it's interesting, it was always in the back of his head. Yeah, she knew how he was about Frodo and not wanting to be apart from him. And I think that, eventually Sam would have realized, hey, this isn't so bad, and that's why he stayed for so long and he didn't go to the West until after Rosie died. I don't think that she gave him an ultimatum because I don't think that's in her personality. The only ultimatum that I think she ever gave him was right when he returned from, Mordor, and, this is before they were married. And she said to him, where have you been? I was waiting for you to propose, and then you go and disappear. And he says, well, I'm going to explain it all to you, and I have a very good reason for disappearing, and you'll understand, but I have some other stuff to take care of. And she said, you better. That was it. You better. So there you go. Now, what's interesting here is the note about Lembas, and we start to see this. When we're first introduced to the concept of Lembas, which is, in the Lothlorien chapter, or rather in the Farewell to Lorien chapter, it's described as being somewhat like the dwarfish cram, which was something that was talked about a little bit in The Hobbit, which is a whey bread. And if you don't know what a whey bread is, it's very simple. It's a stable bread that it takes a really, really long time to go bad, and you could carry it for a long time, and it's usually packed with nutrients. A real-life example is something called hard tack, which is a real thing that is often used in long sea voyages and such in the past. But anyway, so, and Gimli thought, this is cram. And the dwarves use cram all the time as being this, nutrient-dense whey bread that they could eat and survive off of and even thrive on. But it doesn't taste very good. And then, of course, once he bites into it, he's like, oh my God, and he wolfs the whole thing down, And so we learn that, what he ate was enough for several days worth of journeying and hard labor and all that. And that was more than enough. And they taste really, really good. There's a little bit more about Lembas in The Fall of Gondolin as well. and its properties, and of course a lot of it is explained in the War of the Jewels. But anyway, what I'm getting at here is, for somebody like Sam, who is used to really good cooking, which is his own, and note that he's carrying all of his cooking gear, and his cooking gear doesn't quite make it to Mount Doom, but it gets very close. And if you start to think about all the pots and pans and stuff that he's carrying around, and the fact that it's probably all cast iron, he had a really heavy pack. Frodo even comments at a few points that Sam is carrying quite a lot more than anybody thinks he is, and that he's told him quite a few times to not carry so much and not tire himself out so. Which is why I always say is that Sam is actually, out of all the hobbits, he's probably the one that's in the best shape. Tolkien stated that hobbits tended to be a little fat in the stomach, and they like to eat 6 meals a day when they could get it. But Sam, being a working class guy who works with his hands outdoors, and he's certainly probably paid a good wage, but not like anything that, like that Frodo and Bilbo would have for money. So he might not always be getting 6 meals a day, and if he does, he's working it all off. So the film depiction of Sam, I've always said the film depiction of him in terms of acting was perfect. Sean Astin was, I think, the absolute best casting in the entire thing. But he should have not been so chubby. He should have been... Frodo was the chubby one, if anything. And even that, Frodo ends up losing weight pretty quickly. But Sam, I always imagined him as more like the farm boy, So... hardtack, it'll snap your teeth off. Exactly that. Yeah. And I did see your joke there, Tommy. I'm sorry I didn't acknowledge it. I was just in the middle of it. It's funny in a dad joke sort of way. But anyway, let's continue. Can you imagine? They never mention anything like wedding rings in the Lord of the Rings or the Silmarillion. The closest thing that we get is that when Aragorn and Arwen become engaged, it's called plighting their troth. They become engaged. He gives her the ring of Barahir, and it's because it's something that's really, really important to him and his history and his ancestry. Not because it's a ring. It's not like, oh, this is an engagement ring, because he got it from Elrond anyway. But that's the closest thing. But can you imagine Sam getting married after all this, and then somebody's got a wedding ring? As I've seen enough rings, Hobbits having an old-fashioned wheelbarrow wedding. I think a Hobbit wedding would be much the same as any other Hobbit party. It would involve a lot of feasting and a lot of drinking. So everybody's going to eat, and they're going to drink beer, and they're going to have a good time. They're probably going to dance a lot. Hobbits are very festive people. Yeah, we don't get a lot of details about any kind of wedding ceremonies in any of Tolkien's works, really. It's always, and they were wed. Aragorn's wedding is a big deal because, he's the king. But that's a little different, The old maggoty bread. That would be a very bold tactic. But Sam was the one that was always doing the cooking, probably because he was the best cook. Now, somebody had mentioned, let me scroll up here. Somebody had mentioned something about Boromir. Tommy said, Boromir's your least favorite character. You don't have any good reasons why. See, that's the thing about those sort of preferences. There are just going to be characters that you really like, and there are going to be characters that you don't really like. And I think with Boromir is that Tolkien sort of goes a little bit out of his way to make Boromir, who's not in a lot of The Lord of the Rings. He appears only in Book 2. Well, at the very, very beginning of Book 3 is his death scene. But he sort of makes him an unpleasant character. And I think that that's a purposeful tactic so that we don't feel too terrible when he dies. Because if you think about it, he already killed off Gandalf, and we don't know until, a little bit into Book 3 that Gandalf is going to return. And if you were like me, and you grew up, with reading The Hobbit first, Gandalf is this beloved character. To have him die like that suddenly can be rather devastating. So I think, Boromir, you don't really need a reason to like him the least, or you could even choose to dislike him if you want. All right, let's continue here. They turned away and went down into a stony hollow. The westering sun was caught into clouds, and night came swiftly. They slept as well as they could, for the cold turn and turn about in a nook among the great jagged pinnacles of weathered rock. At least they were sheltered from the easterly wind. "Did you see them again, Mr. Frodo?" asked Sam as they sat, stiff and chilled, munching wafers of lembas in the cold grey of early morning. "No," said Frodo. "I've heard nothing and seen nothing for 2 nights now." "Nor me," said Sam. "Ugh, those eyes did give me a turn. But perhaps we've shaken him off at last, the miserable slinker. Gollum! I'll give him a Gollum in his throat if I ever get my hands on his neck." "I hope you'll never need to," said Frodo. "I don't know how he followed us, but it may be that he's lost again, as you say. In this dry, bleak land we can't leave many footprints, nor much scent even for his snuffling nose." "I hope that's the way of it," said Sam. "I wish we could be rid of him for good." "So do I," said Frodo, "but he's not my chief trouble. I wish we can get away from these hills. I hate them. I feel all naked on the east side, stuck up here with nothing but dead flats between me and that shadow yonder. There's an eye in it. Come on. We've got to get down today somehow." But that day wore on, and when afternoon faded toward evening, they were still scrambling along the ridge and found no way of escape. Sometimes in the silence of that barren country they fancied that they heard faint sounds behind them, a stone falling or the imagined step of flapping feet on the rock. But if they halted and stood still listening, they heard no more. Nothing but the wind sighing over the edges of the stones. Yet even that reminded them of breath softly hissing through sharp teeth. All that day the outer ridge of the Emyn had been bending gradually northward as they struggled on. Along its brink there now stretched a wide, tumbled flat of scored and weathered rock, cut every now and again by trench-like gullies that sloped steeply down to deep notches in the cliff face. To find a path in these clefts, which were becoming deeper and more frequent, Frodo and Sam were driven to their left, well away from the edge, and they did not notice that for several miles they had been going slowly but steadily downhill. The cliff top was sinking toward the level of the lowlands. At last they were brought to a halt. The ridge took a sharper bend northward and was gashed by a deeper ravine. On the further side it reared up again, many fathoms at a single leap. A great grey cliff loomed before them, cut sheer down as if by knife stroke. They could go no further forwards, and must turn now either west or east. But west would lead them only into more labour and delay, back toward the heart of the hills. East would take them to the outer precipice. "There's nothing for it but to scramble down this gully, Sam," said Frodo. "Let's see what it leads to." "A nasty drop, I'll bet," said Sam. The cleft was longer and deeper than it seemed. Some way down they found a few gnarled and stunted trees, the first they had seen for days, twisted birch for the most part, with here and there a fir tree. Many were dead and gaunt, bitten to the core by the eastern winds. Once in milder days there must have been a fair thicket in the ravine, but now, after some 50 yards, the trees came to an end. Their old broken stumps straggled on almost to the cliff's brink. The bottom of the gully, which lay along the edge of a rock fold, was rough with broken stone and slanted steeply down. When they came at last to the end of it, Frodo stopped and leaned out. "Look," he said. "We must have come down a long way, or else the cliff is sunk. It's much lower here than it was, and it looks easier, too." Sam knelt beside him and peered reluctantly over the edge. Then he glanced up at the great cliff rising up away on their left. "Easier," he grunted. "Well, I suppose it's always easier than getting down than up." Those as can't fly can jump." "It would be a big jump still," said Frodo. "About, well—" He stood for a moment, measuring it with his eyes. "About 18 fathoms, I should guess. Not more." "And that's enough," said Sam. "Ugh, how I do hate looking down from a height. But looking's better than climbing." "All the same," said Frodo, "I think we could climb here, and I think we shall have a try. See, the rock is quite different from what it was a few miles back. It has slipped and cracked." The outer fall was indeed no longer sheer, but sloped outward a little. It looked like a great rampart or sea-wall whose foundations had shifted, so that its courses were all twisted and disordered, leaving great fissures and long slanting edges that were in places almost as wide as stairs. "And if we're going to try to get down, we'd better try at once. It's getting dark early. I think there's a storm coming." The smoky blur of the mountains in the east was lost in a deeper blackness that was already reaching out westward with its long arms. There was a distant mutter of thunder borne on the rising breeze. Frodo sniffed the air and looked up doubtfully at the sky. He strapped his belt outside his cloak and tightened it, and settled his light pack on his back. Then he stepped toward the edge. "I'm going to try it," he said. "Very good," said Sam gloomily, "but I'm going first." "You?" said Frodo. "What's made you change your mind about climbing?" "I haven't changed my mind. But it's only sense. Put the one lowest as is most likely to slip. I don't want to come down atop you and knock you off. No sense in killing two with one fall." Before Frodo could stop him, he sat down, swung his legs over the brink, and twisted round, scrambling with his toes for a foothold. It is doubtful if he ever did anything braver in cold blood, or more unwise. "No, no, Sam, you old ass," said Frodo. "You'll kill yourself for certain going over like that without even a look to see what to make for. Come back." He took Sam under the armpits and hauled him up again. "Now, wait a bit and be patient," he said. Then he lay on the ground, leaning out and looking down, but the light seemed to be fading quickly, though the sun had not yet set. "I think we could manage this," he said presently. "I could at any rate, and you could too if you kept your head and followed me carefully." "I don't know how you could be so sure," said Sam. "Why, you can't see no bottom in this light. What if you comes to a place where there's nowhere to put your feet or your hands?" "Climb back, I suppose," said Frodo. "Easy said," objected Sam. "Better wait till morning and more light." "No, not if I could help it." And Frodo with a sudden strange vehemence, "I grudge every hour, every minute. I'm going down to try it out. Don't you follow till I come back or call." Gripping the stony limp of the fall with his fingers, he let himself gently down until when his arms were almost at full stretch, his toes found a ledge. "One step down," he said, "and this ledge broadens out to the right. I could stand here without a hold. His words were cut short. The hurrying darkness, now gathering great speed, rushed up from the east and swallowed the sky. There was a dry, splitting crack of thunder right up overhead. Searing lightning smoked down onto the hills. Then came a blast of savage wind, and with it, mingling with its roar, there came a high, shrill shriek. The hobbits had heard just such a Hold on, I have to drink water. Let's try that again. The hobbits had heard just such a cry far away in the Marish as they fled from Hobbiton, and even there in the woods of the Shire it had frozen their blood. Out here in the waste its terror was far greater. It pierced them with cold blades of horror and despair, stopping heart and breath. Sam fell flat on his face. Involuntarily, Frodo loosed his hold and put his hands over his head and ears. He swayed, slipped, and slithered downwards with a wailing cry. Sam heard him and crawled with an effort to the edge. "Master, master," he called, "master." He heard no answer. He found he was shaking all over, but he gathered his breath, and once again he shouted, "Master!" The wind seemed to blow his voice back into his throat, but as it passed, roaring up the gully and away over the hills, a faint answering cry came to his ears. All right, I'm here, but I can't see." Frodo was calling with a weak voice. He was not actually very far away. He had slid and not fallen, and he had come up with a jolt to his feet on a wider ledge not many yards lower down. Fortunately, the rock face at this point leaned well back, and the wind had pressed him against the cliff so that he had not toppled over. He steadied himself a little, laying his face against the cold stone, feeling his heart pounding. But either the darkness had grown complete, or else his eyes had lost their sight. All was black about him. He wondered if he had been struck blind. He took a deep breath. Come back, he heard Sam's voice out of the blackness above. I can't, he said. I can't see. I can't find any hold. I can't move yet. What can I do, Mr. Frodo? What can I do? Shouted Sam, leaning out dangerously far. Why could not his master see? It was dim, certainly, but not as dark as all that. He could see Frodo below him, a grey, forlorn figure splayed against the cliff, but he was far out of the reach of any helping hand. There was another crack of thunder, and then the rain came. In a blinding sheet mingled with hail, it drove against the cliff, bitter cold. I'm coming down to you, shouted Sam, though how he hoped to help in that way he could not have said. No, wait, Frodo called back more strongly now. I shall be better soon. I feel better already. Wait, you can't do anything without a rope. Rope! Cried Sam, talking wildly to himself in his excitement and relief. Well, if I don't deserve to be hung on the end of one as a warning to numbskulls. You're not but a ninny hammer, Sam Gamgee, that's what the gaffer said to me often enough, it being a word of his. Rope! Stop chattering, cried Frodo, now recovered enough to feel both amused and annoyed. Never mind your gaffer. Are you trying to tell yourself you've got some rope in your pocket? If so, out with it. Yes, Mr. Frodo, in my pack and all, carried it hundreds of miles, and I'd clean forgotten it. Then get busy and let an end down. Quickly, Sam unslung his pack and rummaged in it. There, indeed, at the bottom was a coil of the silken grey rope made by the folk of Lorien. He cast an end to his master. The darkness seemed to lift from Frodo's eyes, or else his sight was returning. He could see the grey line as it came dangling down, and he thought it had a faint silver sheen. Now that he had some point in the darkness to fix his eyes on, he felt less giddy. Leaning his weight forward, he made the end fast around his waist, and then he grasped the line with both hands. Sam stepped back and braced his feet against a stump a yard or two from the edge. Half-holed, half-scrambling, Frodo came up over and threw himself on the ground. Thunder growled and rumbled in the distance, and the rain was still falling heavily. The hobbits crawled back into the gully, but they did not find much shelter there. Rills of water began to run down. Soon they grew to a spate that splashed and fumed on the stones, and spouted over on the cliff like the gutters of a vast roof. I should have been half drowned down there, or washed clean off, said Frodo. What a piece of luck you had that rope. Better luck if I'd thought of it sooner, said Sam. Maybe you remember them putting ropes in the boats as we started off in the Elvish country. I took a fancy to it, and I stowed a coil in my pack. Years ago, it seemed. It may be a help in many needs, he said, Haldir or one of those folk, and he spoke right. A pity I didn't think of bringing another length, said Frodo. But I left the company in such a hurry and confusion. If only we had enough that we could use it to get down. How long is your rope, I wonder? Sam paid it out slowly, measuring it with his arms. 5, 10, 20, 30 ells, more or less, he said. Who'd have thought it? Frodo exclaimed. Nah, who would, said Sam. Elves are wonderful folk. It looks a bit thin, but it's tough, and soft as milk to the hand. Packs close, too, and as light as light. Wonderful folk, to be sure. 30 ells, said Frodo, considering. I believe it would be enough if the storm passes before nightfall. I'm going to try it. The rain's nearly given over already, said Sam. But don't you go doing anything risky in the din again, Mr. Frodo. And if I hadn't got over that shriek of the wind yet, if you have, like a black rider it sounded, but one up in the air if they could fly, I'm thinking we'd best lay up in this crack till night's over. And I'm thinking that I won't spend another moment longer than I need, stuck up on the edge with the eyes of the dark country, looking over the marshes, said Frodo. With that, he stood up and went down to the bottom of the gully again. He looked out. Clear sky was growing in the east once more. The skirts of the storm were lifting ragged and wet, and the main battle had passed to spread its great wings over the Emyn Muil, upon which the dark thought of Sauron brooded for a while. Thence it turned, smiting the vale of the Anduin with hail and lightning, and casting its shadow upon Minas Tirith with threat of war. Then, lowering in the mountains, and gathering in its great spires, it rolled on slowly over Gondor and the skirts of Rohan, until far away the riders on the plains saw its black towers moving behind the sun as they rode into the west. But here, over the desert and the reeking marshes, the deep blue sky of evening opened once more, and a few pallid stars appeared, like small white holes in the canopy above the crescent moon. Okay, so I'm going to pause there, and we'll talk about some of that. Hey there, Chewie. So, this is interesting because we see the actual effect of what it would be like for a person to be caught in the gaze of the Eye of Sauron. And it wasn't... Sam didn't experience this. I mean, he heard the Nazgul yell, and he felt the horrible wind and the sudden storm and all that. But Frodo, he felt like he was so completely encased in darkness that he wondered where all the light had gone, and even if he had maybe perhaps completely gone blind, and that's why he could not see. And note that, they talk about the eye right before this happens, and then it says that Sauron's gaze sort of looked at the Emyn Muil for a bit, sort of fixated on kind of where Frodo was, didn't really see him directly, but, just was sort of looking in that area. And then as soon as Frodo touches the elvish rope, he suddenly comes out of the darkness and he's able to see again. And this is the elvish magic that we see. When Sam got this rope, and it's interesting because ever since he left the Shire, Sam, he's sort of like the Boy Scout type archetype, always be prepared, right? And he packed so much stuff. That's why he has all the cooking gear and everything. And he realized, if you guys remember in book 1, pretty soon after leaving, that he didn't bring any rope. And even after leaving Rivendell, he kept... This is where he really started to say it. Oh, rope. If only I had some rope. It might come in handy. Then finally in Lothlorien, he gets a little bit of rope and even asks, is it magic rope? And of course the elves, they're like, we don't understand what that means. It's very good rope. But of course it is magic rope to somebody like a hobbit, or even to somebody like a man or a dwarf, because it's something that only the elves would ever really be capable of. And yet, Tommy, it is true. The imagery here is really amazing, mostly because it's almost all descriptions of the land and the scenery and the feeling of dread. And this is where Tolkien really shines in his descriptions. Now, we're going to see, like I said, because Gollum is going to come into this very quickly, just a few pages, and actually just 2 pages, really. And Gollum will be here. And Gollum's reaction to the rope is almost like Morgoth touching a Silmaril, So we can see the wide gap of how certain characters react to things that are made with elvish magic, And, Gollum, we'll talk about it a little while when he says all the things that he's going to say about Lorien and about what he experienced when he was shadowing the Fellowship of the Ring in, that time that they spent about a month in Lorien. And Gollum was not, so super happy because he couldn't really enter Lorien. He had to kind of wait on the outskirts. And we see that anything that is elvish, which is really to say anything that has any holiness to it, is anathema to him. He can't eat the lembas bread. He can't touch the elvish rope. And this is, of course, we're talking about the high elves, really, And now Haldir and whoever made this rope, they're not exactly high elves. They're likely to be either Sindar, and yes, and for anybody who's wondering, Coyote just put into the chat what some of these imperial measurements are, if you don't know what an ell or a fathom is. But they're likely to be Sindar or even Sylvan elves. But when we look at Galadriel, she's sort of a princess of the Noldor. She's also related to the king of all elves of the Vanyar. She's sort of his great grandniece. And her father, Finarfin, is the High King of the Noldor of the Undying Lands. So when it comes to high elves in Middle-earth, it doesn't get much higher than Galadriel. She's pretty much, like a walking beacon of holiness. Glorfindel is also in that same sort of, tier of elf. And this is why when, when the hunt for Gollum happened, when Gandalf and Aragorn had finished with interrogating Gollum and they realized that they had to imprison him somewhere, they chose Mirkwood because there he could be in the care of elves, but he wouldn't be around anything that was really going to harm him. And especially knowing that Thranduil is extremely humane when it comes to the treatment of prisoners. You know that Gollum was very well treated there. But at the same time, like a place like Lorien, he wouldn't even really be able to enter it without feeling real physical pain. And I think some of that also comes from the Ring of Power that, Galadriel has, but just the implements that are made with the high elvish magic. Lembas is not something that is of Middle-earth. It's something that is of the Undying Lands. And of course it came to Middle-earth with people like Galadriel. And there's a whole interesting culture behind it that it's something that's supposed to really only be handed out by an elf that is royalty and an elf that is a woman. And they are called the Avanaldili, which is sort of like the daughters of Yavanna. Not literal, but sort of like their students. So these characters, like Galadriel, they know the secret of it, and they have a sect of Yavanaldili, and Galadriel herself is a Yavanaldil. And we see also that she must have learned a lot from Melian in Doriath. So there's a lot of angelic influence here, and that she teaches a lot of this to the Sylvan elves and to the Sindar elves that live in her land, which is not really her land, but it is a land that has adopted her and her husband as well. So what I'm getting at here is, we see the reaction later, and you guys are very familiar probably with the scene where they tie up Gollum with the same rope, and the reaction, the sort of visceral reaction that she has. And then we compare that to here, where Frodo very briefly was sort of caught in the darkness. The eye of Sauron passed over him, and he is filled with fear and despair and darkness that he can't even see. And this all goes away as soon as he touches this rope. Let's see what Chewie said. Would a non-royal common elf from the same generation and experience be as high as an elf like Galadriel? Well, in the sense of high, when we speak of the high elves, what we're really talking about is any elf that lived in the Undying Lands. And with Galadriel, she has ties to royalty of both the Noldor and the Vanyar. And her husband is an incredibly important Teleri elf, to the point where Tolkien actually wanted to sort of change Celeborn's entire backstory and make him a prince that actually had lived at Alcolanda, that he was not, a Sindar as we know him, but Falmari. But anyway, when it comes to it, basically whether somebody is a high elf or not really just comes down to whether or not they ever lived in the West. And there are a precious few of those elves left in Middle-earth at this point. Celeborn is an interesting situation. And when we get to Unfinished Tales, we'll talk a lot about Celeborn and his whole multiple choice backstory. But there are others. There are others, like we know about Gildor, we know about Glorfindel, and we know about Galdor. There are others out there, But what's interesting, though, is that's the high elf thing is sort of like Eldar, right? All elves are Eldar, but then some of them are not. It's sort of like an interesting thing where the term is not used consistently, just like the term magic is not used consistently. So I think what it comes down to, the answer really is no. There isn't anybody that is from the same generation as Galadriel that has the same experiences that is also in Middle-earth. The closest thing is Glorfindel. He's close to it. But a lot of the others have either gone home or they've gone into hiding in one fashion or another. Maybe Celeborn is among their number, maybe he's not. But like I said, when we talk about high elves, it's such a contentious thing to talk about. But when we think about how do we really define it, you just point at Galadriel and you say, well, I know one when I see one, and that's a high elf. Elrond is an interesting one. Let's talk about Elrond very briefly to answer your question. He did not consider himself to be a high elf, mostly because he's not an elf. He is half elf, and that's sort of its own separate thing. But if you think of who his ancestors were, he's descended from Turgon, the High King of the Noldor, the King of Gondolin, which was the greatest elvish civilization to ever be in Middle-earth. And this is his grandson, Elrond. And he doesn't consider himself to be a high elf. He says that the high elves are his kin. And the reason is just really simple. It's not really because he's Parathel. That comes into it a little bit. But it's just because he's never been to the West. He's never been to the West. And then you have to sit and wonder, well, he does go to the West at the end. So does he become a high elf at that point? And then Tolkien would tell you, well, he's not an elf at all. So there's that as well. He's a half elf. So like I said, it's when we get into the categories of elves, it's interesting because it's sort of wheels within wheels. There's three main types, right? The Noldor, the Vanyar, the Teleri. But then you say, well, what about the Avari? Right? There's sort of this other thing that's separate from the rest, right? And then you say, well, there's two types of elves. There's those that are the Avari, and then there's everybody else. And they're like, okay, well, do the Avari break into smaller groups? Why are there so many Teleri? We'll talk about that when we get to the War of the Jewels as well. But basically, the answer to your question is no, but with so many caveats that it's open to interpretation. So let us continue here. Let's see. Where did I leave off? Ah, here we are. It's good to be able to see again, said Frodo, breathing deep. Do you know, I thought for a bit I had lost my sight. From the lightning or something else worse. I could see nothing at all until the grey rope came down. It seemed to shimmer somehow. It does look sort of silver in the dark, said Sam. Never noticed it before, though I can't remember as I've ever had it out since I first stowed it. But if you're set on climbing, Mr. Frodo, how are you going to use it? 30 ells, say, about 18 fathom. That's no more than your guess at the height of the cliff. Frodo thought for a while. Make it fast to that stump, Sam, he said. Then I think you'll have your wish this time and go first. I'll lower you, and you need not do more than use your feet and hands to fend yourself off the rock. though if you put your weight on some of the ledges and give it a rest, it will help. When you're down, I'll follow. I feel quite myself again now." "Very well," said Sam heavily. "If it must be, let's get it over." He took up the rope and made it fast over the stump nearest to the brink. Then the other end he tied about his own waist. Reluctantly he turned and prepared to go over the edge a second time. It did not, however, turn out half as bad as he had expected. The rope seemed to give him confidence, though he shut his eyes more than once when he looked down between his feet. There was one awkward spot where there was no ledge and the wall was sheer and even undercut for a short space. There he slipped and swung out the silver line, but Frodo lowered him slowly and steadily, and it was over at last. His chief fear had been that the rope length would give out while he was still high up. But there was still a good bite in Frodo's hands when Sam had come to the bottom and called up, "I'm down!" His voice came up clearly from below, but Frodo could not see him. His grey elven cloak had melted into the twilight. Frodo took rather more time to follow him. He had the rope about his waist, and it was fast above, and he had shortened it so that it would pull him up before he reached the ground. Still, he did not want to risk a fall, and he had not quite Sam's faith in this slender grey line. He found two places all the same where he had to trust wholly to it, smooth surfaces where there was no hold even for his strong hobbit fingers, and the ledges were far apart. But at last he too was down. "Well," he cried, "we've done it. We've escaped from the Emyn And now what next, I wonder? Maybe we shall soon be sighing for good hard rock underfoot again." But Sam did not answer. He was staring back up the cliff. "Ninny hammers," he said. "Noodles! My beautiful rope. There it is, tied to a stump, and we're at the bottom. Just as nice as a little stair for that slinking Gollum as we could leave. Better put up a signpost to say which way we've gone. I thought it seemed a bit too easy. If you could think of any way that we could have both used the rope and yet brought it down with us, then you could pass me on. You could pass on me, Ninnyhammer, or any other name your gaffer gave you," said Frodo. "Climb up and untie it and let yourself down if you want to." Sam scratched his head. "No, I can't think how, begging your pardon," he said. "But I don't like leaving it, and that's a fact." He stroked the rope's end and shook it gently. "It goes hard parting with anything I brought out of the elf country, made by Galadriel herself too, maybe." "Galadriel," he murmured, nodding his head mournfully. He looked up and gave one last pull to the rope, as if in farewell. To the complete surprise of both the hobbits, it came loose. Sam fell over, and the long grey coils slithered silently down on top of him. Frodo laughed. "Who tied the rope?" he said. "A good thing it held as long as it did. To think I trusted all my weight to your knot." Sam did not laugh. "I may not be much good at climbing, Mr. Frodo," he said in injured tones. "But I do know something about rope and about knots. It's in the family, as you might say. Why, my granddad and my Uncle Andy after him, and what was the gaffer's elder brother, he had a rope walk over Tiefield many years ago, and I put a fastest hitch over the stump as one could have done, in the Shire or out of it. Then the rope must have broken. Frayed on the rock edge, I expect," said Frodo. "I bet it didn't," said Sam in an even more injured voice. He stooped and examined the ends. "Nor it hasn't either. Not a strand." "Then I'm afraid it must have been the knot," said Frodo. Sam shook his head and did not answer. He was passing the rope to his fingers thoughtfully. "Have it your own way, Mr. Frodo," he said at last, "but I think the rope came off itself when I called." He coiled it up and stowed it lovingly in his pack. "It certainly came," said Frodo, "and that's the chief thing. But now we've got to think of our next move. Night will be on us soon. How beautiful the stars are and the moon." "They do cheer the heart, don't they?" said Sam, looking up. "Elvish they are somehow. And the moon's growing. We haven't seen him for a night or two in this cloudy weather. He's beginning to give quite a light." "Yes," said Frodo, "but he won't be full for some days. I don't think we'll try the marshes by the light of half a moon." Yeah. I wanted to pause there, but I really love Sam's dialogue here. He's like, hey, this is probably the most he ever really talks back to Frodo. He's like, wait, hold on a second now. You could abuse me all you want, but don't you dare talk about my knots. This is like, he's really insulted that Frodo is saying, hey man, the knot you tied maybe wasn't so great. And then, Sam claps back at him like that. And he's like, well, maybe the rope broke, and it didn't. And then Frodo's, well, I guess it must have been the rope. And, Sam refuses to believe it. I agree with Sam. The rope is magic. Now, the other two things I wanted to talk about. One is quite light and cheerful. Sam cursing. I just love it. Like, because we hear about the characters occasionally cursing. They'll say, oh, he's off cursing or whatever. And here we see, Ninnyhammer is a sort of a name that, his dad had for him. And he did say that it was a word that his dad came up with. But he goes, noodles, which I think is hilarious. And this tells us a few things. This tells us that hobbits say things like that, and that's the closest that they're going to come to any sort of profanity, is going, noodles. And it also tells us that they have noodles in the Shire, which is amazing. I wonder what Sam's favorite type of noodle is. The idea, it's like, hamburgers, it's a very similar sort of thing. The moon and the stars, really interesting, because Sam becomes so much more perceptive in the second half of The Lord of the Rings. And I think I think what I just said is completely wrong, by the way. It's just that he seems to become much more perceptive. And I think it's because we're getting to know him better. Previously, it was, when it started out, it was Sam and Frodo and Pippin along with them. And then soon Merry was there. And then not much longer, we had Aragorn. And then we had a whole big group of them. And now with it really just being Frodo and Sam, we're getting to this part where, when we think about who wrote it in universe, and we know that, at the end of it, that it's sort of like Frodo's book. But there are portions of it that could only have been written by Sam. And I think that as we get further and further towards the end, Sam steps in as the author more and more until, the very last part is almost completely in his narrative voice. And he becomes incredibly perceptive. He's the one that thinks of the star glass, which of course we normally call the Phial of Galadriel. And he thinks of it in connection to the Silmarils, and he thinks of it as being the same light that Beren had plucked from the Dark Lord's crown. And here he's saying the moon and the stars, they're kind of elvish in a way, right? Oh, I don't think Gollum did it, no, because Gollum would have preferred to wait till they leave and then climb down the rope himself. Except, as soon as he touched the rope, it would be painful for him. So I don't think he would be messing around with it. So he would see this, he's looking, he's watching, he would see this whole display and think, as soon as a nasty hobbits is gonna climb down the ropes. And then if he touched it, oh, you're nasty, oh, elf rope, So it wouldn't work. I don't think the stump crumbled. I mean, sometimes it takes dynamite to get a stump gone. Like I said, the rope is magic. That's what it really comes down to. He gave it a tug, and it came loose. And I bet Haldir would have told him that he did that if Haldir had had the time to explain it to him. But anyway, going back to the moon and the stars are elvish, he says. It's just an incredible insight because... we know in real life, right? In English, the word elf is derived from the Old Norse, and it refers to a spirit, But in the realm of Tolkien, it's related to Eldar. And what does that mean? Eldar is the name of the elves that were given to them by one of the Valar, which was Oroma. Because Oroma was the first of the Valar to find... Well, okay, he wasn't the first of the Valar to find the elves. Melkor was. Melkor is a whole different thing. So let's just ignore Melkor for a moment. He was the first of the Valar to discover the elves. They had a name for themselves already in their own language. They called themselves the Quendi, which means the speakers, because as far as they could tell, they were the first beings to walk the earth that had voices. They hadn't met the Valar yet. There weren't men or dwarves yet. I mean, there were men and dwarves, but they were asleep in the earth. They hadn't awoken yet. So, as far as they knew, they were the first things to have voices, to have created language. So they called themselves the speakers, Quendi. But when Orma first saw them under the stars that Varda created specifically to give them more light, because Middle Earth was in a constant nighttime. There was no sun yet. There was no moon yet. There was the nightfall in Middle Earth with respect to Blind Guardian. So she made sure that there were plenty of stars so that when the firstborn children of Iluvatar awokened out of the earth, wherever they were going to be, they would be able to have some light. And then, of course, he sees them and he calls them the Eldar. And El is the word for stars. So he's basically calling them the people under the stars. So the stars are very elvish. I just accidentally closed the book. I'll have to find my place again. The stars are very elvish. And then he talks about the moon, and this is really cool because if you notice, I pointed this out in book 1. When we were reading book 1, and we were in Bree, and of course, Frodo sang a little song that Bilbo had written called "The Man in the Moon Came Down Too Soon." I posted the wrong YouTube. Oh my God, you're right. How did I do that? All right, I have to fix that, obviously. That's completely wrong. Thank you for that, Alice. Let me fix that before I talk about the moon. Good gravy. Just a complete clipboard fail. All right, I fixed it. Thank you. All the other places that I posted it to. That's it's gonna take me a few minutes. Not a few minutes, but it's gonna take me like a minute. I can't believe I did that. Unbelievable. At least the Twitch link worked. One more. Okay, it's all fixed. Thank you so much, Alice. I did not notice that. A big L for me there. All right, so when, Frodo sang the song, "The Man in the Moon Came Down Too Soon." And I pointed out that if you notice, Frodo, and therefore Bilbo, who wrote that song, always referred to the moon with male pronouns. And here, we see that happening again. As soon as I find where I was, I'm going to reread just a little bit of that so we could bring your memory back to that. Here it is. "And the moon's growing. We haven't seen him for a night or two in this cloudy weather. He's beginning to give quite a light." And Frodo says, "Yes, but he won't be full for some days. I don't think we'll try the marshes by the light or half a moon." So, why is it that the moon is a dude? Right? We talked about this. It's because, yes, the moon has a gender, because the moon is a vessel that is carrying the last flower of Telperion, and the Maya spirit, the angel that is carrying it, is a guy. His name is Tilion. I had to think about it for a second. His name is Tilion. And the sun, you'll notice, is always referred to with female pronouns. The sun is a lady because the sun is a vessel carrying the last fruit of Laurelin, the gold. And the angel that is carrying it is a lady named Arian. So you'll notice that even hobbits always refer to the moon as male and the sun as female, and that's just the way it is. And we know that sometimes they come together because he can't help himself. Sometimes he's just got to be near her because she's so wonderful, and that's how we get things like eclipses, you know? And that's why the calendar is a little screwed up, and we have to have leap years as well. All right, let's continue here. And welcome in, Alice. Under the first shadows of night, they started out on the next stage of their journey. After a while, Sam turned and looked back at the way that they had come. The mouth of the gully was a black notch in the dim cliff. "I'm glad we've got the rope," he said. "We've set off a little puzzle for that footpad, anyhow. He could try his nasty flappy feet on those ledges." They picked their steps away from the skirts of the cliff, among a wilderness of boulders and rough stones, wet and slippery with the heavy rain. The ground still fell away sharply. They had not gone very far when they came upon a great fissure that yawned suddenly black before their feet. It was not wide, but it was too wide to jump across in the dim light. They thought they could hear water gurgling in its depths. It curved away on their left northward, back toward the hills, and so barred their road in that direction, at any rate while the darkness lasted. "We had better try and find a way back southwards along the line of the cliff, I think," said Sam. "We might find some nook there, or even a cave or something." "I suppose so," said Frodo. "I'm tired, and I don't think I can scramble among stones much longer tonight, though I grudge the delay. I wish there was a clear path in front of us, then I'd go till my legs gave way." They did not find the going any easier at the broken feet of the Emyn Muil, nor did Sam find any nook or hollow to shelter in, only bare, stony slopes frowned over by the cliff, which now rose again higher and more sheer as they went back. In the end, worn out, they just cast themselves onto the ground under a lee of boulder lying not far from the foot of the precipice. There for some time they sat huddled mournfully together in the cold, stony night, while sleep crept upon them in spite of all they could do to hold it off. The moon now rode high and clear. Its thin white light lit up the faces of the rocks and drenched the cold, frowning walls of the cliff, turning all the wide, looming darkness into a chill, pale grey scored with black shadows. "Well," said Frodo, standing up and drawing his cloak more closely round him, "you sleep for a bit, Sam, and take my blanket. I'll walk up and down on sentry for a while." Suddenly he stiffened, and stooping he gripped Sam by the arm. "What's that?" he whispered. "Look over there on the cliff." Sam looked and breathed in sharply through his teeth. He said, "That's what it is. It's that Gollum. Snakes and adders. And to think I thought we'd puzzle him with our bit of a climb. Look at him, like a nasty crawling spider on a wall." Down the face of a precipice, sheer and almost smooth it seemed in the pale moonlight, a small black shape was moving with its thin limbs splayed out. Maybe its soft, clinging hands and toes were finding crevices and holes that no hobbit could have ever seen or used, but it looked as if it was just creeping down on sticky pads, like some large, prowling thing of insect kind. And it was coming down head first, as if it was smelling its way. Now and again it lifted its head slowly, turning it right back on its long, skinny neck, and the hobbits caught a glimpse of two small, pale, gleaming eyes. Its eyes that blinked in the moon for a moment and then were quickly lidded again. "Do you think he could see us?" said Sam. "I don't know," said Frodo quietly, "but I think not. It is hard even for friendly eyes to see in these elven cloaks. I cannot see you in the shadow at even a few paces, and I've heard that he doesn't like sun or moon." "Then why is he coming down just here?" asked Sam. "Quietly, Sam," said Frodo. "He can smell us, perhaps, and he could hear as keen as elves, I believe. I think he heard something now, our voices probably. We did a lot of shouting away back there, and we were talking far too loudly until a minute ago." "Well, I'm sick of him," said Sam. "He's come down too often for me, and I'm going to have a word with him if I can. I don't suppose we could give him the slip now anyway." Drawing his grey hood well over his face, Sam crept stealthily towards the cliff. "Careful," whispered Frodo, coming behind. "Don't alarm him. He's much more dangerous than he looks." Now, I want to address something, because this can be sort of confusing for people who want to know what does Gollum really look like? Right? What does he really look like? What's he all about in terms of the visual? The movie version of Gollum is so iconic that it can be hard to imagine anything but this pale, gangly, naked creature, you know? And even before the films had come out, there were a lot of artists that depicted him very much in that way. In the Rankin Bass versions of The Hobbit and The Return of the King, he did appear to be sort of amphibian-like, and there's reasons for that in the descriptions, especially in The Hobbit, where you didn't really know that he himself was a sort of a corrupted hobbit. In The Return of the King, it was a little different. But anyway, what I'm getting at here is that Gollum, the descriptions can be a little odd. He is depicted as a black figure, and you'll hear this a lot, a black figure, a black head rising out of the water. That's a description that's used a bit later. And people were wondering, well, does Gollum have very dark skin? Now, if you're like me and you're a big fan, and you saw the Fellowship of the Ring film version in the movie theater, you might remember that the briefest glimpse that we got of Gollum, he had very, very dark skin. And if you got it later on home video, on DVD, it was changed because they changed his design when they made the Two Towers. And so they retroactively went back and changed him in that very briefest glimpse that you get of him in the Fellowship of the Ring. And there are also moments that Tolkien uses the word black quite a lot to describe Gollum, but he also uses pale a lot. So, for his complexion, Gollum is extremely pale. And, it makes sense as somebody who really just stays out of the light of day as much as he can. He would be, almost deathly white. But where does the black description come from? And this is something that a lot of people who maybe grew up with the films would maybe have a slightly hard time wrapping their heads about. But first of all, Gollum is not naked. He is wearing clothes. And if we go back to The Hobbit, we even get a description of him as even having pockets in his clothes. He's not wearing this little tiny loincloth. He has a tunic on, and it's a black tunic. And that's why he's described as a black figure. And he has hair. He has black hair. So that's another thing that is easy to miss if you're, thinking of him as the little Andy Serkis creature. And yes, Chewie, he has beady little eyes. Now, I think the choice to give him the very round, big, bulbous eyes that he had in the movies was an important choice to make him a lot more expressive, and also to make him at times visually sympathetic. And there are a lot of people who that I've talked to personally that have said that they had a hard time in The Return of the King when he really shows the depths of his depravity and how terrible he really is, because they're thinking, oh, but he's so cute. You know what I mean? And that, I think, was very much on purpose. I think that's very much on purpose, because we have to feel those pangs of patience and pity and mercy that Gandalf would want us to have. And if he's just hideously disgusting looking, then, perhaps we wouldn't have those feelings, But shout out to anybody that saw The Fellowship of the Ring in the theater and saw that sort of a little bit more goblin-looking Gollum, Let's continue here. The black, crawling shape was now 3/4 of the way down, and perhaps 50 feet or less upon the cliff's foot. Crouching stone still in the shadow of a large boulder, the hobbits watched him. He seemed to have come to a difficult passage, or to be troubled about something. They could hear him snuffling, and now and again there was a harsh hiss of breath that sounded like a curse. Just a pause there. Can you imagine? I would imagine that Gollum's version of cursing is probably a lot nastier than Sam's version of cursing. But could you imagine Gollum if he was cursing in the fashion that Sam does? Nurdles! You know, that would be pretty funny. All right, let's continue here. He lifted his head, and they thought they heard him spit. Then he moved on again. Now they could hear his voice creaking and whistling.
Cautious, my precious. More haste, less speed. We mustn't risk our neck, must we, precious? No, precious. Gollum!
He lifted his head again, blinked at the moon, and quickly shut his eyes.
We hate it, he hissed. Nasty, nasty, shivery light it is. It spies on us, precious. It hurts our eyes.
He was getting lower now, and the hisses became sharper and clearer.
Where is it? Where is it, my precious, my precious? It is ours, it is, and we want it. The thieves, the filthy little thieves. Where are they with my precious? Curse them, we hate them.
It doesn't sound as if he knows we're here, does it? Whispered Sam. And what's his precious? Does he mean the... Shh! Breathed Frodo. He's getting near now, near enough to hear a whisper. Indeed, Gollum had suddenly paused again, and his large head on its scrawny neck was lolling from side to side, as if he was listening. His pale eyes were half unlidded. Sam restrained himself, though his fingers were twitching. His eyes, filled with anger and disgust, were fixed on the wretched creature as he now began to move again, still whispering and hissing to himself. At last he was no more than a dozen feet from the ground, right above their heads. From that point there was a sheer drop, for the cliff was slightly undercut, and even Gollum could not find hold of any kind. He seemed to be trying to twist round so as to go legs first, when suddenly with a shrill, whistling shriek he fell. And as he did so he curled his legs and arms up round him, like a spider whose descending thread is snapped. Sam was out of his hiding in a flash and crossed the space between him and the cliff foot in a couple of leaps. Before Gollum could get up he was on top of him. But he found Gollum more than he bargained for, even taken like that suddenly off his guard after a fall. Before Sam could get a hold, long legs and arms were wound round him, pinning his arms, and a clinging grift, soft but horribly strong, was squeezing him. Like a slowly tightening cords, a clammy fingers were finding for his throat. Then sharp teeth bit into his shoulder. All he could do was butt his hard, round head sideways into the creature's face. Gollum hissed and spat, but he did not let go. Things would have gone ill with Sam if they had been alone, but Frodo sprang up and drew Sting from its sheath. With his left hand he drew back Gollum's head by his own thin, lank hair, stretching its long neck and forcing his pale, venomous eyes to stare up at the sky. "Let go, Gollum," he said. "This is Sting. You have seen it before once upon a time. Let go or you'll feel it this time. I'll cut your throat." Gollum collapsed and went as loose as wet string. Sam got up, fingering his shoulder. His eyes smouldered with anger, but he could not avenge himself. This miserable enemy lay grovelling on the stones, whimpering.
"Don't hurt us! Don't let them hurt us, precious. They won't hurt us, will they, nice little hobbitses? We didn't mean no harm, but they jumps on us like cats on poor mices, they did, precious, and we're so lonely. We'll be nice to them, very nice, if they be nice to us, won't we? Yes, yes."
"Well, what's to be done with it?" said Sam. "Tie it up so as it can't come sneaking after us no more, I say."
"But that would kill us, whimpered Gollum. "Cruel little hobbitses. Tie us up in the cold, hard lands and leave us, Gollum.
Sobs welled up in his gobbling throat. "No," said Frodo. "If we kill him, we must kill him outright. But we can't do that, not as things are. Poor wretch. He has done us no harm." "Oh, hasn't he?" said Sam, rubbing his shoulder. "Anyway, he meant to, and he means to, I'll warrant. Throttle us in our sleep, that's his plan." "I dare say," said Frodo. "But what he means to do is another matter." He paused for a while in thought. Gollum lay still, but stopped whimpering. Sam stood glowering over him. It seemed to Frodo, then, that he heard, quite plainly but far off, voices out of the past. What a pity Bilbo did not stab the vile creature when he had a chance. Pity! It was pity that stayed his hand. Pity and mercy. Not to strike without need. I do not feel any pity for Gollum. He deserves death.
deserves death? I dare say he does. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give that to them? Then be not too eager to deal out death in the name of justice, fearing for your own safety. Even the wise cannot see all ends.
Very well, he answered aloud, lowering his sword. But still I am afraid, and yet, as you see, I will not touch the creature, for now that I see him, I do pity him. Sam stared at his master, who seemed to be speaking to someone who was not there. Gollum lifted his head.
Yes, wretched we are, precious, he whined. Misery, misery. Hobbits won't kill us, nice hobbits.
No, we won't, said Frodo. But we won't let you go either. You're full of wickedness and mischief, Gollum. You'll have to come with us, that's all, while we keep an eye on you. But you must help us if you can. One good turn deserves another.
Yes, yes, indeed, said Gollum, sitting up. Nice hobbits. We will come with them. Find them safe paths in the dark, yes, we will. And where are they going in these cold, hard lands, we wonders, yes, we wonders.
He looks up at them, and a faint light of cunning and eagerness flickered for a second in his pale, blinking eyes. Sam scowled at him and sucked his teeth, but he seemed to sense that there was something odd about his master's mood, that the matter was beyond argument. All the same, he was amazed at Frodo's reply. Frodo looked straight into Gollum's eyes, which flinched and twisted away. You know that. Or else you guess well enough, Smeagol, he said, quietly and sternly. We are going to Mordor, of course, and you know the way there, I believe. Said Gollum, covering his ears with his hands as if such frankness and the open speaking of the names hurt him.
We guessed, yes, we guessed, he whispered. And we don't want them to go there, did we? No, precious, not the nice hobbits. Ashes, ashes, and dust, and thirst there is, and pits, 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 and orcs, thousands of orcs. Nice hobbits mustn't go to those places.
So you've been there, Frodo insisted, and you're being drawn back there, aren't you?
Yes, yes. No! Shrieked Gollum. Once, by accident it was, wasn't it, precious? Yes, by accident. But we won't go back, no, no.
Then suddenly his voice and language changed, and he sobbed in his throat, and spoke, but not to them.
Leave me alone, Gollum. You hurt me. Oh, my poor hands, Gollum. I don't want to come back. I can't find it. I'm tired. Oh, we can't find it. Gollum. Gollum. No. Nowhere. They're always awake. Dwarves, men, and elves. Terrible elves with bright eyes. I can't find it.
He got up and clenched his long hand into a bony, fleshless knot, shaking it towards the east.
We won't, he cried. Not for you.
Then he collapsed again.
Gollum.
He whimpered with his face to the ground.
Don't look at us. Go away. Go to sleep.
Okay, let's pause there. He's talking to Sauron, which is interesting. And I think that, like, Frodo and Gollum both have this moment where they're talking to someone that's not there. Now, we know that when Frodo speaks, and Sam sort of makes this observation that he's speaking to someone that isn't there, he's talking, of course, to Gandalf, because he's remembering what Gandalf told him, and he's sort of giving him a reply. And in this case, the same thing is happening to Gollum. We aren't privy to what he's hearing, but Sauron told him something, and he's answering him. He's telling him no. And this is really, really the biggest and most important thing about Gollum and his personality is that he can tell Sauron no. he can tell him, no, I won't help you. It doesn't matter how much you hurt me. We get a little hint of what happened here. We know that his hands were very injured. We'll hear a little bit about it more later when he talks about Sauron more directly. We know that Sauron hurt Gollum, and he tortured him, and he got information out of him even. He learned about a place called the Shire. He learned about creatures called hobbits, and he learned a name, Baggins, Well, that's all stuff that we know, but we don't know anything else of the conversation that happened, or any of the things that Sauron would have said to Gollum. But we can see here that Sauron told him to find the ring. And Gollum is telling him, I can't. And we know that's not true, because we know that Gollum knows that Frodo has the ring. But, he is the type of person that could say no to Sauron, that could lie to Sauron, even if he's only imagining it happening. Sauron isn't hearing these words that Gollum is saying, but this is Gollum talking to the memory of Sauron, just like Frodo is talking to the memory of Gandalf. And here we start to see the ways in which Frodo and Gollum are similar. Beyond just the fact that they're both hobbits, and that the only difference really between them is that Gollum is a good person, and is that Gollum is not a good person and Frodo is. That's the only difference, really. Other than that, they've both really had a really bad time. They've been through the ringer, and there's a lot between them that is mirrored. And we'll see that more and more as we go through it. If they could meet on a level of morality, hey, Matt, if they could meet on a level of morality, then they would almost be the same guy. Like, they could be friends even, But Gollum does, he doesn't want to be friends with Frodo. He kind of does and he doesn't. We're going to see this. Frodo is who he is. He's never really changing in a major way, right? Except for what we're told. But Gollum is somebody who almost sees Frodo as, I could be that guy. I could be like him. He treats me nicely. He's not like Sauron. He's not like that at all. Except for the fact that there is something much stronger than Frodo. And that's the ring. And the fact that they're so linked into each other, and the fact that Gollum had it for so long. The only person in the world that had the ring longer than Gollum is Sauron. Deagle had it for what, a minute? 2 minutes? Gollum, about 500 years. Bilbo, about 60 years. And Frodo, at this point in the story, about 18 years. So, Sam, maybe a day, right? So, and that's later. So like I said, we're starting to see the way that they're mirrors for each other. And it's interesting because, Gollum is a character that was introduced in The Hobbit. He's not like Bilbo. Bilbo's not like him. Those two would never see eye to eye on anything except for the fact that they both like telling riddles. But with Frodo, you're going to see a lot of mirroring. And you're going to see a lot of it where Frodo understands Gollum in a way that Sam does not. And Gollum understands Frodo in a way that Sam does not. But unlike the film, Frodo also knows what he's dealing with. He knows this guy's up to no good. And you can even see it, out of all the characters that they did wonderfully in the films, like Gandalf and Aragorn and Bilbo and Sam most of all, there were a few that they bungled. Denethor, Faramir, Frodo. They completely bungled Frodo. And you even see it how vicious Frodo could be, how sharp his mind is, how quick to anger he can be. And you see a little bit of that sort of Smeagol brain, in the back of his head, where he says, "You've seen this sword before, and if you don't knock it off, you're going to feel it. I will cut your throat." Can you imagine the Elijah Wood version saying anything like that? No, not even close, Not even close. Frodo lost a lot of his agency in the adaptation. He was one of the most mishandled characters, which is a shame because he's ostensibly the main character. But, like I said, I don't hate the films. I like them quite a lot. They got a lot right as well. So let's see. Matt says, you do think it's interesting character study for Frodo and Gollum as a vision of what Frodo could become, and his empathy for him as a matter of hope for self-redemption. And what's interesting, the empathy, we talked about, the patience, pity, and mercy, and that was all, pity and mercy were in capital letters. These are the values, not of Frodo. Frodo's learning these values. He's starting to understand these values. They come from Gandalf, and from Gandalf they come from Nienna, the Lady of Patience and Pity and Mercy of the Valar. But what's interesting here, and you'll see it, is that Gollum has an empathy for Frodo because he knows what it's like to carry the ring. And Frodo is doing something here that Gollum views as being a huge, gigantic mistake. He's going to Mordor. And you notice that, unlike in the film, Frodo doesn't explicitly tell Gollum what he plans to do in Mordor, just that he has to go there. And there is a point in Gollum's mind where he starts to worry that Frodo is bringing Sauron his ring back. Now, Gollum is not a nice guy. He's not a good person. He is an evil, wretched little soul. He's full of hatred and fear and spite and pettiness and entitlement and all these other negative qualities that can go with it. Greed, you just think mostly of in negatives, right? But he's not capital E evil. He's not someone that would want Sauron to take over the world. And he even knows that if Sauron gets this ring, there's no stopping him. Not because Sauron's going to become so much more powerful, but because Sauron's enemies are going to become weaker. And because it's the only chance to really put a permanent stop to Sauron is to get rid of this ring. So he doesn't want Frodo to go into Mordor. He wants the ring for himself. But he also hates the ring. We have to remember he hates the ring because the ring is Sauron. And even as early as The Hobbit, we were told that when he got the ring, first he wore it all the time. And then eventually he didn't like wearing it anymore. So he kept it in his pocket. And eventually, even that was kind of grossing him out. So that's where he started keeping it in a little hidey hole. And he would only use it when he needed to use it to hunt for food. So what we have here is Gollum and the ring have a toxic relationship, right? They hate each other. But they're still so connected to each other because they were together for 5 centuries. And so Gollum is in this position where he's sort of in love with the One Ring, but he hates the One Ring. He knows that it has harmed him in a way that nothing else has, not even Sauron. He knows that he's been alive for far too long. He knows that his existence is miserable. He can't be around anything elvish. He can't be around the sun. Even the moon hurts him to a certain extent. So he's miserable, he's wretched, he is absolutely deserving of patience and pity and mercy, but he's also sort of a disgusting creature, you know. He threatened him, certainly, but it's more of the manner of it. You know what I mean? He didn't say in the film, "I'll cut your throat." It's like I said, you see a little bit of the Smeagol brain coming in there, the viciousness that you can see that happens because Frodo is a little bit more like Smeagol than he would ever care to admit. It's just that he's more constrained by morality. And here it is, where the pragmatic thing to do would be to kill him. And even in that sense, he says to Sam, they openly discuss it. We can't just leave him here to die. If we're going to kill him, we're going to have to make it quick. You know, we have to just get it over with. And then he remembers Gandalf's words, and he says, you know, it is easy to give death to someone that deserves it, but can you give life to someone that deserves it? And if you can't give life to someone that deserves life, then what gives you the right to give death to someone that you think deserves it? And he realizes that he's not the arbiter of who lives and dies, you know. That's not to say that he's wrong for threatening him. Gandalf threatened Gollum too, you know. But that doesn't mean that he was wrong to do so. But I think what happened here is that, yes, he really wants to do it. Bilbo wanted to do it. And Bilbo even said, not a fair fight. That would be wrong. That's killing somebody in cold blood. That's not self-defense at this point. So, whereas Gollum would just happily strangle and mutilate his way through hordes of people, giving them not much thought at all, he still feels guilt about his very first murder. And he's gone through a lot of mental gymnastics to make himself feel less guilty about it. He's made up a lie that he tells himself that the ring was a birthday present from his grandmother, who had tons of rings like that. He knows it's not true, and Gandalf made him realize that it wasn't true, and he made him face the truth, which was incredibly painful to him. Note that I didn't say harmful. I said painful. Yeah, and that's the thing. Yeah, Frodo comes off very cold as ice. Whereas in the film, Frodo is a lot softer, you know. And sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it's not such a good thing. But there you have it. Frodo's bravery and his cunning got kind of neutered in the film version, which is a shame. But there you have it. Let's continue on here, because I could talk about the psychology of Gollum all day long, and we still have a lot to get through, and especially the fact that we have a lot more Gollum to get through. So let's continue. Let's see, where were we? He will not go away or go to sleep on your command, Smeagol, said Frodo. But if you really wish to be free of him again, then you must help me. And that I fear, means finding us a path towards him. But you need not go all the way, not beyond the gates of his land. Gollum sat up again and looked at him under his eyelids.
He's over there, he cackled. Always there. Orcs will take you all the way. Easy to find orcs east of the river. Don't ask Smeagol. Poor Smeagol, he went away long ago. They took his precious, and he's lost now.
Perhaps we'll find him again, if you come with us, said Frodo.
No, never. He's lost his precious, said Gollum.
Get up, said Frodo. Gollum stood up and backed away against the cliff. Now, said Frodo, can you find a path easier by day or by night? We are tired, but if you choose the night, we'll start tonight.
The big light hurts our eyes, they do, Gollum whined. Not under the white face, not yet. It will go behind the hills soon, yes. Rest a bit first, nice hobbits.
Then sit down, said Frodo, and don't move. The hobbits seated themselves beside him. one on either side, with their backs to the stony wall, resting their legs. There was no need for any arrangement by word. They knew that they must not sleep for a moment. Slowly the moon went by. Shadows fell down from the hills, and all grew dark before them. The stars grew thick and bright in the sky above. No one stirred. Gollum sat with his legs drawn up, knees into chin, flat hands and feet splayed on the ground, his eyes closed, but he seemed tense, as if thinking or listening. Frodo looked across at Sam. Their eyes met, and they understood. They relaxed, leaning their heads back, and shutting their eyes, or seeming to. Soon the sound of their soft breathing could be heard. Gollum's hands twitched a little. Hardly perceptible, his head moved to the left and the right, and first one eye and then the other opened a slit. The hobbits made no sign. Suddenly, with startling agility and speed, straight off the ground with a jump like a grasshopper or a frog, Gollum bounded forward into the darkness. But that was just what Frodo and Sam had expected. Sam was on him before he had gone 2 paces after his spring. Frodo, coming from behind, grabbed his leg and threw him. "Your rope might prove useful again, Sam," he said. The meatwad Smeagol,
"Meatwad's more like this. He's up here. Gollum's down here, precious."
Sam got out the rope. "And where are you off to in the cold, hard lands, Mr. Gollum?" he growled. "We wonders, to find some of your orc friends, I warrant, you nasty, treacherous creature. It's round your neck this rope ought to go, and a tight noose, too." Gollum lay quiet and tried no further tricks. He did not answer Sam, but gave him a swift, venomous look. "All we need is something to keep a hold of him," said Frodo. "We want him to walk, so it's no good tying his legs or his arms. He seems to use them nearly as much. Tie one end to his ankle, and keep a grip on the other end." He stood over Gollum while Sam tied the knot. The results surprised them both. Gollum began to scream, a thin, tearing sound, very horrible to hear. He writhed and tried to get his mouth to his ankle and bite the rope. He kept on screaming. At last Frodo was convinced that he really was in pain, but it could not be from the knot. He examined it and found that it was not too tight, indeed hardly tight enough. Sam was gentler than his words. "What's the matter with you?" he said. "If you'll try to run away, you must be tied. And we don't wish to hurt you."
"It hurts us. It hurts us," hissed Gollum. "It freezes, it bites. Arrows twisted it, curse them. Nasty, cruel hobbits. That's why we tries to escape. Of course it is, precious. We guess they were cruel hobbits. They visit elves, fierce elves with bright eyes. Take it off us, it hurts us."
"No, I will not take it off you," said Frodo. "Not unless—" He paused a moment and thought. "Not unless there is any promise you can make that I can trust."
"We will swear to do what he wants. Yes, yes," said Gollum,
still twisting and grabbing at his ankle.
"It hurts us."
"Swear," said Frodo.
"Smeagol,"
said Gollum suddenly and clearly, opening his eyes wide and staring at Frodo with a strange light.
"Smeagol will swear on the precious."
Frodo drew himself up. And again Sam was startled by his words in a stern voice. "On the precious! How dare you!" he said. "Think! One ring to rule them all, and in all the darkness bind them. Would you commit your promise to that, Smeagol? It will hold you, but it is more treacherous than you are. It may twist your words. Beware." Gollum cowered.
"Oh, the precious, on the precious," he repeated.
"And what would you swear?" asked Frodo.
"To be very good," said Gollum.
Then crawling to Frodo's feet, he grovelled before him, whispering hoarsely. A shudder ran over him, as if his words shook his very bones with fear.
"Smeagol will swear never, never to let him have it. Never. Smeagol will save it, but he must swear on the precious."
"No, not on it," said Frodo, looking down at him with stern pity. "All you wish is to see it and touch it if you can, though you know it would drive you mad. Not on it. Swear by it if you will. For you know where it is. Yes, you know, Smeagol. It is before you." For a moment it appeared to Sam that his master had grown, and Gollum had shrunk, a tall, stern shadow, a mighty lord who hid his brightness in grey cloud, and at his feet a little whining dog. Yet the two were in some way very akin and not alien. They could reach one another's minds. Gollum raised himself and began pawing at Frodo, fawning at his knees. "Down! Down!" said Frodo. "Now speak your promise."
"We promise, yes, I promise," said Gollum. "I will serve the master of the precious. A good master. A good Smeagol." "Gollum!
Suddenly he began to weep and bite at his ankle again. "Take the rope off, Sam," said Frodo. Reluctantly, Sam obeyed. At once Frodo got up and began prancing about like a whipped cur whose master had patted it. From that moment a change, which lasted for some time, came over him. He spoke with less hissing and whining, and he spoke to his companions direct, not to his precious self. He would cringe and flinch if they stepped near him or made any sudden movement, and he avoided the touch of their elven cloaks. But he was friendly, and indeed pitifully anxious to please. He would cackle with laughter and caper if any jest was made, or even if Frodo spoke kindly to him, and weep if Frodo rebuked him. Sam said little to him of any sort. He suspected him more deeply than ever, and if possible liked the new Gollum, the Smeagol, less than the old. "Well, Gollum, whatever is we're to call you," he said. "Now for it. The moon's gone and the night's going. We'd better start."
"Yes, yes," agreed Gollum, skipping about. "Off we go. There's only one way across, between the north end and the south end. I found it, I did. Orcs don't use it. Orcs don't know it. Orcs don't cross the marshes. They go round for miles and miles. Very lucky you came this way. Very lucky you found Smeagol, yes. Follow Smeagol."
He took a few steps away and looked back inquiringly, like a dog inviting them for a walk. "Wait a bit, Gollum," cried Sam. "Not too far ahead now. I'm going to be at your tail, and I've got the rope handy."
"No, no," said Gollum. Smeagol promised.
In the deep of night, under hard, clear stars, they set off. Gollum led them back northward for a while along the way they had come. Then he slanted to the right, far from the steep edge of the Emyn down the broken stony steps toward the vast fens below. They faded swiftly and softly into the darkness. Over all the leagues of waste before the gates of Mordor, there was a black silence. All right, I need to get my throat a rest here. That's the end of that chapter. Let's see. Do we have time for chapter 2? To be honest, I don't know. I think we do have time for chapter 2. It's about 20 pages, and there's not as much lore here in chapter 2. There's not as much to talk about. So we'll continue here with chapter 2, the passage of the marshes. Gollum moved quickly with his head and neck thrust forward, often using his hands as well as his feet. Frodo and Sam were hard put to it to keep up with him, but he seemed no longer to have any thought of escaping, and if they fell behind he would turn and wait for them. After a time he brought them to the brink of the narrow gully that they had struck before, but they were now further from the hills.
"Here it is," he cried. "There's a way down inside, yes. Now we follows it. Out away over there."
He pointed south and east towards the marshes. The reek of them came to their nostrils, heavy and foul, even in the cool night air. Gollum cast up and went down along the brink, and at length he called to them,
"Here, we can get down here. Smeagol sent this way once. I went this way, hiding from orcs."
What is the pages? Yeah, sorry, Matt. I had to do it. He led the way, and following him, the hobbits climbed down into the gloom. It was not difficult, for the rift was at this point only some 15 feet deep and about a dozen across. There was running water at the bottom. It was in fact the bed of one of the many small rivers that trickled down from the hills to feed the stagnant pools and mires beyond. Gollum turned to the right, southward, more or less, and splashed along with his feet in the shallow stony stream. He seemed greatly delighted to feel the water, and chuckled to himself, sometimes even croaking, in a sort of song.
"The cold, hard lands, they bite our hands, they glaze our feet. The rocks and stones are like gold bones of bare of meat. But stream and pool is wet and cool, so nice to your feet, and now we wish, ha ha, What does he wish?
He asks, looking sidelong at the hobbits.
We'll tell you,
He croaked.
he guessed it long ago. Baggins guessed it.
A glint came into his eyes, and Sam, catching the gleam in the darkness, thought it far from pleasant.
Alive with breath, as cold as death, never thirsty, never drinking, clad in mail, never clinking, drowns on dry land, thinks an island is a mountain, thinks a fountain is a puff of air, so sleek, so fair, what a joy to meet, or only wish to catch a fish so juicy, sweet.
These words only made more pressing to Sam's mind a problem that had been troubling him from the moment when he understood that his master was going to adopt Gollum as a guide. The problem of food. It did not occur to him that his master might also have thought of it, but he supposed Gollum had. Indeed, now he had Gollum kept himself in all his lonely wandering. Not too well, thought Sam. He looks fair famished. Not too dainty to try what hobbit tastes like if there ain't no fish, I'll wager. Supposing as he could catch us napping. Well, he won't, not Sam Gamgee for once. A little in the dark. I do like that in the film they had him sing a little bit of that song, even if it was in the Forbidden Pool and not the Dead Marshes. I do like that they did include the song. They stumbled along in the dark, winding gully for a long time, or so it seemed to the tired feet of Frodo and Sam. The gully turned eastward, and as they went on it broadened and got gradually shallower. At last the sky above grew faint with the first grey of morning. Gollum had shown no signs of tiring, but now he looked up and halted.
Day's near,
he whispered, as if day was something that might overhear him and spring on him.
Smeagol will stay here. I will stay here, and the yellow face won't see me.
You should be glad to see the sun, said Frodo. But we will stay here. We are too tired to go any further at present.
You are not wise to be glad of the yellow face, said Gollum. It shows you up. Nice sensible hobbits stay with Smeagol. Orcs and nasty things are about. They can see a long way. Stay and hide with me.
The three of them settled down to rest at the foot of the rocky wall of the gully. It was not much more than a tall man's height now, and at its base there was a wide, flat shelves of dry stone. The water ran in a channel on the other side. Frodo and Sam sat on one of the flats, resting their backs. Gollum paddled and scrabbled in the stream. We must take a little food, said Frodo. Are you hungry, Smeagol? We have very little to share, but we will spare you what we can. At the word hungry, a greenish light was kindled in Gollum's pale eyes, and they seemed to protrude further than ever from his thin, sickly face. For a moment he relapsed into his old Gollum matter.
We are famished, yes, famished we are, precious,
he said.
What is it they eat? Have they nice fishes?
His tongue lolled out between his sharp yellow teeth, licking his colourless lips. No, we've got no fish, said Frodo. We've only got this. He held up a wafer of lembas, and water if the water is fit to drink.
Yes, nice water, said Gollum. Drink it while we can. But what is it they've got, precious? Is it crunchable? Is it tasty?
Frodo broke off a portion of a wafer and handed it to him on his leaf wrapping. Gollum sniffed at the leaf and his face changed. A spasm of disgust came over it, and a hint of his old malice.
Smeagol smells it, he said. Leaves out of the elf country. Gah! They stinks. He climbed in those trees, and he couldn't wash that smell off his hands, my nice hands.
Dropping the leaf, he took a corner of the lembas and nibbled it. He spat, and a fit of coughing shook him. He sputtered.
You tried to choke S'more, poor Smeagol. Dust and ashes, we can't eat that. He must starve. But Smeagol doesn't mind. Nice hobbits. Smeagol has promised. He will starve. He can't eat hobbits' food. He will starve. Poor thin Smeagol.
I'm sorry, said Frodo, but I can't help you, I'm afraid. I think this food would do you good if you try. But perhaps you can't even try. Not yet, anyway. Now, it's just interesting to note that he says not yet, anyway. So he's realized that anything elvish is anathema to Gollum, as I mentioned here. But he's starting to think in terms of Gollum's redemption. He's starting to think that with time, he could fix Gollum, essentially, and that maybe one day he will be able to look at the sun or be able to eat lembas bread. We know that's not true. Not because it can't happen, but because Gollum doesn't want it to happen. Redemption is a thing that has to be voluntary. The person has to want redemption, and they have to work towards redemption. You can't drag somebody into the light kicking and screaming. It doesn't work like that. But Frodo's starting to think in terms of maybe I can help him. And that's why he says, not yet. The hobbits munched their lembas in silence. Sam thought it tasted far better somehow than it had for a good while. Gollum's behavior had made him attend to its flavor again. But he did not feel comfortable. Gollum watched every morsel from hand to mouth like an expectant dog by a diner's chair. Only when they had finished and were preparing to rest was he apparently convinced that they had no hidden dainties that he could share in. Then he went and sat by himself a few paces away and whimpered a little. "Look here," Sam whispered to Frodo, not too softly, for he did not really care whether Gollum heard him or not. "We've got to get some sleep, but not both together with that hungry villain nigh. Promise or no promise. Smeagol or Gollum, he won't change his habits in a hurry, I'll warrant. You go to sleep, Mr. Frodo, and I'll call you when I can't keep my eyelids propped up. Turning about, same as before, while he's loose." "Perhaps you're right, Sam," said Frodo, speaking openly. "There is a change in him, but just what kind of change and how deep I'm not sure yet. Seriously, though, I don't think there's any need for fear at present. Still watch if you wish. Give me about 2 hours, not more, and then call me." So tired was Frodo that his head fell forward on his breast, and he slept almost as soon as he had spoken the words. Gollum seemed no longer to have any fears. He curled up and went quickly to sleep, quite unconcerned. Presently his breath was hissing softly through his clenched teeth, but he lay still as stone. After a while, fearing that he would drop off himself, if he sat listening to his two companions' breathing, Sam got up and gently prodded Gollum. His hands uncurled and twitched, but he made no other movement. Sam bent down and said, "Fish," close to his ear, but there was no response, not even a catch in Gollum's breathing. Sam scratched his head. "Must really be asleep," he muttered, "and if I was like Gollum, he wouldn't wake up never again." He restrained the thoughts of his sword and that rope that sprang to his mind, and went and sat down by his master. When he woke up, the sky above him was dim, not lighter, but darker when they had breakfasted. Sam leapt to his feet, not least from his own feeling of vigor and hunger. He suddenly understood that he had slept the daylight away, 9 hours at least. Frodo was still fast asleep, lying now stretched on his side. Gollum was not to be seen. Various reproachful names for himself came to Sam's mind, drawn from the gaffer's large paternal word hoard. Then it also occurred to him that his master had been right. There had been at the present been nothing to guard against. They were, at any rate, both alive and unthrottled. "Poor wretch," he said half remorsefully. "Now I wonder what he's gone to."
Not far,"
said a voice above him. He looked up and saw the shape of Gollum's large head and ears against the evening sky. "Hey, what are you doing?" cried Sam, his suspicious look coming back as soon as he saw that shape.
"Smeagol is hungry," said Gollum. "Be back soon."
"Come back now," shouted Sam. "Hi, come back." But Gollum had vanished. Frodo woke at the sound of Sam's shout and sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Hello," he said. "Anything wrong? What's the time?" "I don't know," said Sam. "After sundown, I reckon, and he's gone off. Says he's hungry." "Don't worry," said Frodo. "There's no help for it. But he'll come back, you'll see. The promise will hold yet a while, and he won't leave us precious anyway." So this is really interesting because you would often wonder, and this is sort of like going back to Sauron in the First Age, right? Sauron at the end of the First Age, where after the fall of Morgoth, the end of the War of Wrath, Sauron realizes that he's been on the losing side. So he goes and he approaches the one who's leading the host of the Valar, which is Eanwa. And he takes himself into a fair guise. He makes himself appear beautiful again. And he goes and he supplicates himself before Eanwa, and he abjures his evil deeds. And he begs for pardon. And everybody that saw this happen perceived Sauron to be completely truthful that he really did wish for repentance at this point. He didn't want it bad enough because he didn't do what Eonwa told him to do, which was to travel willingly to the Undying Lands and ask Manwë for pardon. But in that moment, yes, he really was trying to redeem himself. Now, with Gollum, they fall asleep. He could have killed them. He promised not to do that, and he made... They don't use the word oath, but he sort of made an oath. But here's what he could have done that he didn't do. He could have stolen the One Ring when Frodo and Sam were asleep, and he didn't do that. And this tells us that at this stage, he really has changed. Occasionally, the Gollum part of him comes bubbling up to the surface and then is repressed again. And we, of course, know what happens. But the fact that he didn't even try to take the ring or even to try to escape from this situation that he's found himself in, he didn't try that. So it is sort of interesting. He's more concerned about getting something to eat that isn't lembas bread at this point. Also, I just want to mention that Sam once again mentions that his father, the gaffer, Hamfast Gamgee, had all sorts of pejoratives in his word hoard, which is a great sort of phrase, right? I mean, think about it, like the gaffer comes off as this type of old guy who has 50 different ways to call you an idiot. And I mean, even just the name Samwise, which really, when you think about it, it means half wise. And in Tolkien's letters, he said, Samwise essentially means half-wit. Aragorn had a different thought in that, and he wrote a letter at some point in the Fourth Age to, you want a word hoard? Yeah, word hoard sounds great, right, kids? It sounds amazing. A hoard of words to use at your disposal. Like Ninny Hammer, right? Ninny Hammer's pretty good. But, Aragorn wrote a letter in the Fourth Age to the Shire. He wrote it in Sindarin because this was an official communique from the king, so it had to be written in Sindarin. And he refers to, wanting to meet his friends from the Shire, and that he would meet them in Bree. And he is especially looking forward to meeting a certain person with the name of Purhale, which is the Sindarin form of Samwise. Pur meaning half, like Sam means half. And then Hale is wise, half wise. And in a parenthetical, Aragorn says that a better name for him would be Panhale, which is fully wise. So it's just interesting that Hamfast the Gaffer gives his son this sort of insulting name, and Aragorn's like, yeah, you know what? That's not a good name for you. You should have a better name. And if you look at the names of Sam's brothers, they didn't fare much better. They didn't fare much better at all. His sister has a decent name, but all of the girls, in the Shire have like flower names. So you just point to any flower and there you named your daughter. All right, let's continue here. Let's see, where was I though? No. Frodo made light of it when he learned that they had slept soundly for hours with Gollum, and a very hungry Gollum too, loose behind them. Don't think of any of your gaffer's hard names, he said. You were worn out, and it has turned out well. We are now both well rested, and we have a hard road ahead, the worst road of all. No one named Tree Fart or Turd Blossom. Well, let me tell you, Moogle, if Hamfast had more children. Perhaps. He only had 4 children. But if he had more children, perhaps he would have... I don't think Turd Blossom. I don't think that one. But Tree Fart, maybe. Maybe. You could see him holding up another Hobbit child. I shall name him Tree Fart. But it wouldn't be tree fart. It would be something like tree toot or tree puff or something. You know what I mean? It would be something like a little bit more poetic, like Samwise. And by the way, Samwise's name in Westruun is Banazir, or just Ban for short. Let's continue here. Tree fart. Tree fart sounds like the worst ent, right? That's just the worst ent. Like you could see like a tree be like, "Oh, here comes that guy. Tree fart." Yeah, Woodworth. Yeah. Well, yeah. There you go. Wood. Woodworth. You know, you could see that. It's the worst ent. How's it going, Wayne? All right, let's continue here. All right. About the food, said Sam. How long is it going to take us to do this job? And when it's done, what are we going to do then? This whey bread keeps you on your legs in a wonderful way, though it doesn't satisfy the innards proper, as you might say. Not to my feeling, anyhow. Meaning no disrespect to them that made it. But you have got to eat some of it every day, and it doesn't grow. I reckon we've got enough to last, say, 3 weeks or so, and that with a tight belt and light tooth, mind you. We've got a bit free with it so far. I don't know how long we shall take to finish, said Frodo. We were miserably delayed in the hills, but Samwise Gamgee, my dear Hobbit, indeed, Sam, my dearest Hobbit, friend of all friends, I do not think we need give thought to what comes after that. To do the job as you put it, what hope is there that we ever shall? And if we do, who knows what will come of that? If the one goes into the fire, and we are at hand, I ask you, Sam, are we ever likely to need bread again? I think not. If we can nurse our limbs to bring us to Mount Doom, that is all we can do. More than I can, I begin to feel. Sam nodded silently. He took his master's hand and bent over it. He did not kiss it, though his tears fell on it. Then he turned away, drew his sleeve over his nose, and got up and stamped about, trying to whistle, and sang between the efforts, "Where's that dreaded creature?" So I just want to say that's like gotta be one of the darkest things that Frodo has ever said. You know what I mean? That it's really got to be the darkest thing that Frodo says. Sam's sitting here thinking, "Hey, look, how long is it going to take us to get to Mount Doom? Because we're kind of running a little low on food, and maybe we've been eating too much of this stuff, and maybe we start to ration it out." And Frodo's just like, "What does it matter? We're going to die anyway." It's like, maybe if we're like extremely lucky, we'll destroy the ring. But what happens after that? We're dead. Dead man walking, right? So it's got to be by far the darkest thing that Frodo has ever said. It was actually not long before Gollum returned, but he came so quietly that they did not hear him till he stood before them. His fingers and face were soiled with black mud. He was still chewing and slavering. What he was chewing they did not ask or like to think. Worms or beetles or something slimy out of holes, thought Sam. Ugh, the nasty creature, the poor wretch. Gollum said nothing to them until he had drunk deeply and washed himself in the stream. Then he came to them, licking his lips.
"Better now," he said. "Are we rested? Ready to go on? Nice hobbits, they sleep beautifully. Trust Smeagol now? Very, very good."
The next stage of their journey was much the same as the last. As they went on, the gully became ever shallower, and the slope of its floor more gradual. Its bottom was less stony and more earthy, and slowly its sides dwindled to mere banks. It began to wind and wander. That night drew its end, but clouds were now over moon and star, and they knew of the coming of day only by the slow spreading of the thin grey light. In a chill hour they came to the end of the watercourse. The banks became moss-grown mounds. Over the last shelf of rotting stone, the stream gurgled and fell down into a brown bog and was lost. Dried reeds hissed and rattled, though they could not feel wind. On either side and in front, wide fens and mires now lay, stretching away southward and eastward in the dim half-light. Mists curled and smoked from dark and noisome pools. The reek of them hung stifling in the still air. Far away, now almost due south, the mountain walls of Mordor loomed like a black bar of rugged clouds floating above a dangerous fog-bound sea. The hobbits were now wholly in the hands of Gollum. They did not know, and could not guess in that misty light, that they were in fact only just within the northern borders of the marshes, the main expanse of which lay south of them. They could, if they had known the lands with some delay, have retraced their steps a little, and then turning east have come round over hard roads to the bare plain of Dagorlad, the field of the ancient battle before the gates of Mordor. Not that there was any great hope in such a course. On that stony plain there was no cover, and across it ran the highways of the orcs and the soldiers of the enemy. Not even the cloaks of Lorien would have concealed them there. "How do we shape our course now?" Smeagol asked Frodo. "Must we cross these evil-smelling fens?"
No need at all, said Gollum. Not if hobbits want to reach the Dark Mountain and go see him very quick. Back a little and round a little.
His skinny arm waved north and east.
And you can come on hard, cold roads to the very gates of his country. Lots of his people will be looking out for guests, very pleased to take them straight to him. Oh, yes, his eye watches that way all the time. It caught Smeagol there long ago.
Gollum shuddered.
But Smeagol has used his eyes since then. Yes. I've used eyes and feet and nose since I know other ways. More difficult, not so quick, but better if you don't want him to see. Follow Smeagol. He could take you through the marshes, through the mists, nice thick mists. Follow Smeagol very carefully, and you may go a long way, quite a long way, before he catches you again. Yes. Perhaps.
Your wife loves the word Nargothrond? She made up silly languages when she was a kid. Well, that's what Tolkien did, and then he grew up and made slightly less silly languages, right? Nargothrond is a great one. I need to drink more water. It was already day, a windless and sullen morning, and the marsh reeks lay in heavy banks. No sun pierced the low, clouded sky, and Gollum seemed anxious to continue the journey at once. So after a brief rest they set out again, and was soon lost in a shadowy, silent wood. Cut off from all view of the lands about, either the hills that they had left or the mountains that they sought, they went slowly in single file, Gollum, Sam, Frodo. Frodo seemed the most weary of the three, and slow though they went he often lagged. The hobbits soon found that what had looked like one vast fen was really an endless network of pools, and soft mires, and winding, half-strangled watercourses. Among those a cunning eye and foot could thread a wandering path. Gollum certainly had that cunning, and needed all of it. His head on his long neck was ever turning this way and that, while he sniffed and muttered all the time to himself. Sometimes he would hold up his hand and halt them, while he went forward a little, crouching, testing the ground with fingers or toes, or merely listening with one ear pressed to the earth. It was dreary and wearisome. Cold, clammy winter still held sway in this forsaken country. The only green was the scum of livid weed on the dark, greasy surfaces of the sullen waters. Dead grasses and rotting reeds loomed up in the mists like ragged shadows of long-forgotten summers. As the day wore on, the light increased a little, and the mists lift, growing thinner and more transparent. Far above the rot and vapors of the world, the sun was riding high and golden now in a serene country, with floors of dazzling foam, but only a passing ghost of her could they see below, bleared, pale, giving no color and no warmth. So just to point out there, I mentioned it earlier that the moon is always referred to as a guy, and then they say her, they're referring, of course, to the sun. But even at this faint reminder of her presence, Gollum scowled and flinched. He halted their journey, and they rested, squatting like little hunted animals in the borders of a great brown reed thicket. There was a deep voice, only scraped in its surfaces by the faint quiver of empty seed plumes and broken grass blades trembling in small air movements they could not feel. "Not a bird," said Sam mournfully.
No birds, said Gollum. Nice birds. He licked his teeth. No birds here. There are snakes, worms, things in the pools. Lots of things, lots of nasty things. No birds, he ended sadly.
Sam looked at him with distaste. So passed the third day of their journey with Gollum. Before the shadows of evening were long in their happier lands, they went off again, always on and on with only brief halts. These they made not so much a rest as to help Gollum. For now, even he had to go forward with great care, and he was sometimes at a loss for a while. They had come to the very midst of the dead marshes, and it was dark. They walked slowly, stooping, keeping close in line, following attentively every move that Gollum made. The fens grew more wet, opening into wide, stanglet meres, among which it grew more and more difficult to find the firmer places where feet could tread without sinking into gurgling mud. The travelers were light, or perhaps none of them would have ever found a way through. Presently it grew altogether dark. The air itself seemed black and heavy to breathe. When lights appeared, Sam rubbed his eyes. He thought his head was going queer. He first saw one with the corner of his left eye, a wisp of pale sheen that faded away. But others appeared soon after, some like dimly shining smoke, some like misty flames flickering slowly above unseen candles. Here and there they twisted like ghostly sheets unfurled by hidden hands, but neither of his companions spoke a word. At last Sam could bear it no longer. "What's all this, Gollum?" he said in a whisper. "These lights, they're all round us now. Are we trapped? Who are they?" Gollum looked up. A dark water was before him, and he was crawling on the ground this way and that, doubtful of the way.
"Yes, they are all round us," he whispered. "The tricksy lights. Candles of corpses, yes, yes. Don't you hear them? Don't look. Don't follow them. Where's the master?"
Sam looked back and found that Frodo had lagged again. He could not see him. He went some paces back into the darkness, not daring to move far or to call in more than a hoarse whisper. Suddenly he stumbled against Frodo, who was standing lost in thought, looking at the pale lights. His hands hung stiff at his sides. Water and slime were dripping from them. "Come, Mr. Frodo," said Sam. "Don't look at them. Gollum says we mustn't. Let's keep up with him and get out of this cursed place as soon as we can, if we can." "All right," said Frodo, as if returning out of a dream. "I'm coming. Go on." Hurrying forward again, Sam tripped, catching his foot in some old rock or tussock. He fell and came heavily on his hands, which sank deep into sticky ooze so that his face was brought close to the surface of the dark mere. There was a faint hiss, a noisome smell went up, and the lights flickered and danced and swirled. For a moment the water below him looked like some window, glazed with grimy glass, through which he was peering. Wrenching his hands out of the bog, he sprang back with a cry. "There are dead things! Dead faces in the water," he said with horror. "Dead faces!" Gollum laughed.
"The dead marshals, yes, yes. That is their name," he cackled. "You should not look in when the candles are lit."
"Who are they? What are they?" asked Sam, shuddering, turning to Frodo, who was now behind him. "I don't know," said Frodo in a dreamlike voice, "but I have seen them too. In the pools, when the candles were lit, they lie all in the pools, pale faces, deep, deep under the water. I saw them, grim faces and evil, and noble faces and sad. Many faces proud and fair, and weeds in their silver hair. But all foul, all rotting, all dead. A fell light is in them." Frodo hid his eyes in his hands. "I know not who they are, but I thought I saw their men and elves and orcs beside them."
"Yes, yes," said Gollum. "All dead, all rotten. Elves and men and orcs, the dead marshals. There was a great battle long ago, yes. So they told him when Smeagol was young, when I was young, before the precious came. It was a great battle. Tall men with long swords and terrible elves and orcs shrieking. They fought on the plain for days and months at the Black Gates, but the marshes have grown since then, swallowed up their graves, always creeping, creeping."
"But that is an age and more ago," said Sam. "The dead can't really be there. Is it some devilry hatched in the dark land?"
"Who knows? Smeagol doesn't know," answered Gollum. "You cannot reach them. You cannot touch them. Only shapes to see, perhaps not to touch. No, precious, all dead."
Sam looked darkly at him and shuddered again, thinking that he had guessed why Smeagol had tried to touch them. "Well, I don't want to see them," he said. "Never again. Can't we get on and get away?"
"Yes, yes," said Gollum, "but slowly, very slowly, very carefully, or hobbits go down to join the dead ones and light little candles. Follow Smeagol. Don't look at the lights."
He crawled away to the right, seeking for a path round the mere. They came close behind, stooping, often using their hands even as he did. "3 precious little Gollums in a row we shall be if this goes on much longer," thought Sam. At last they came to the end of the Black Mere, and they crossed it perilously, crawling or hopping from one treacherous island tussock to another. Often they floundered, stepping or falling hands first into waters as noisome as a cesspool, till they were slimed and fouled up almost to their necks, and stank in one another's nostrils. It was late in the night when at length they reached firmer ground again. Gollum hissed and whispered to himself, but it appeared that he was pleased in some mysterious way by some blended sense of feel and smell and uncanny memory for shapes in the dark. He seemed to know just where he was again, and to be sure of his road again.
"Now on we go," he said. "Nice hobbits. Brave hobbits. Very, very wary, of course. So are we, my precious all of us. But we must take Master away from the wicked lights. Yes, yes, we must."
With these words he started off again, almost at a trot, down what appeared to be a long lane between high reeds, and they stumbled after him as quickly as they could. But in a little while he stopped suddenly and sniffed the air doubtfully, hissing, as if he were troubled or displeased again. "What is it?" growled Sam, misinterpreting the signs. "What's the need to sniff? The stink nearly knocks me down with my nose held. You stink, and Master stinks. This whole place stinks."
"Yes, yes, and Sam stinks," answered Gollum. "Poor Smeagol smells it, but good Smeagol bears it. Helps nice Master. But that's no matter. The air's moving. Change is coming. Smeagol wonders he's not happy."
He went on again, but his uneasiness grew, and every now and again he stood up to his full height, craning his neck eastward and southward. For some time the hobbits could not hear or feel what was troubling him. Then suddenly all 3 halted, stiffening and listening. To Frodo and Sam it seemed that they heard far away a long wailing cry, high and thin and cruel. They shivered. At the same moment the stirring of the air became perceptible to them, and it grew very cold. As they stood straining their ears they heard a noise like a wind coming in the distance. The misty lights wavered, dimmed, and went out. Gollum would not move. He stood shaking and gibbering to himself until, with a rush, the wind came upon them, hissing and snarling over the marshes. The night became less dark.
"Nargothrond."
I just saw your... you typed that on the Discord, by the way, instead of the chat there. The night became less dark, light enough for them to see, or half see, shapeless drifts of fog, curling and twisting as it rolled over them and past them. Looking up, they saw the clouds breaking and shedding, and then high in the south the moon glimmered out, riding in the flaying wrack. All right, I just want to pause here, since they're out of the dead marshes, to talk about it, because, there was the great... They're talking about the Battle of Dagorlad, and there had been many more battles in this area since then. But that's why there are men and elves and orcs, and the dead marshes have grown and swallowed up their graves. And what we're seeing are, these lights that came up are sort of like the will-o'-the-wisp sort of phenomenon. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail about the dead marshes here. Because we're going to talk about the dead marshes and how they were used as sort of a strategic point in many battles, not just the Battle of Dagorlad, but a lot of the wars that Gondor had with the Wain Riders. But we're going to cover that later during the Return of the King's appendixes, actually, because there's a lot of information about it there. So that's why I didn't really talk about that much. Well, let's continue here. Let's see. For a moment the sight of it gladdened the hearts of the hobbits, but Gollum cowered down, muttering curses on the white face. Then Frodo and Sam, staring at the sky, breathing deeply of the fresher air, saw it come, a small cloud flying from the accursed hills, a black shadow loosed from Mordor, a vast shape, winged and ominous. It scuttled across the moon, and with a deadly cry went away westward, outrunning the wind in its fell speed. They fell forward, grovelling heedlessly on the cold earth, but the shadow of horror wheeled and returned, passing lower now, right above them, sweeping the fen-reek with its ghastly wings. And then it was gone, flying back to Mordor with the speed of the wrath of Sauron, and behind it the wind roared away, leaving the dead marshes bare and bleak. The naked waste, as far as the eye could pierce, even to that distant menace of the mountains, was dappled with the fitful moonlight. Frodo and Sam got up, rubbing their eyes like children wakened from an evil dream, to find the familiar night still over the world, but Gollum lay on the ground as if he had been stunned. They roused him with difficulty, and for some time he would not lift his face, but bent forward on his elbows, covering the back of his head with his large, flat hands.
"Wraiths,"
he wailed.
"Wraiths on wings. The precious is their master. They see everything. Everything. Nothing can hide from them. Curse the white face. And they tell him everything. He sees. He knows. Gollum, Gollum, Gollum."
It was not until the moon had sunk, wastering away behind Tol Brandir, that he would get up or make a move. From that time on, Sam thought that he sensed a change in Gollum again. He was more fawning and would be friendly, but Sam surprised some strange looks in his eyes at times, especially towards Frodo. And he went back more and more to his old manner of speaking, and Sam had another growing anxiety. Frodo seemed to be weary to the point of exhaustion. He said nothing, indeed he hardly spoke at all, and he did not complain, but he walked like one who carries a load, the weight of which is ever increasing, and he dragged along slower and slower, so that Sam had often to beg Gollum to wait and not leave their master behind. In fact, with every step forward, the gates of Mordor, Frodo felt that the ring on its chain about his neck grew more burdensome. He was now beginning to feel it as an actual weight dragging him earthwards. But far more he was troubled by the eye, so he called it to himself. It was that more than the drag of the ring that made him cower and stoop as he walked. The eye, that horrible growing sense of a hostile will that strove with great power to pierce all shadow of cloud and earth and flesh, and to see you, to pin you under its deadly gaze, naked, immovable, so thin, so frail and thin, and veils would become that still warded it off. Frodo knew just where the present habitation and heart of that will now was, as certain as a man who can tell the direction of the sun with his eyes shut. He was facing it, and its potency beat upon his brow. Gollum probably felt something of the same sort. But what they went on in its wretched heart became the pressure of the eye, and the lust of the ring that was so near, and his grovelling promise, made half in fear of cold iron, the hobbits did not guess. Frodo gave no thought to it, Sam's mind occupied mostly with his master, hardly noticing the dark cloud that had fallen on his own heart. He put Frodo in front of him now, and kept a watchful eye on every movement of his, supporting him if he stumbled, and trying to encourage him with clumsy words. So you could see more of what I was talking about earlier, of the narrative shift from Frodo to Sam. Because Frodo, at this point, he's getting really close to Mordor, and he's starting to feel that weight, and the eye searching for him. And he's starting to really just... He probably, later on, didn't even remember a lot of this. And when it came time to write it all down, it was mostly Sam that remembered all this and committed it to memory. So we're seeing things less from Frodo's perspective and more from Sam's perspective as we continue onwards. When day came at last, the hobbits were surprised to see how much closer the ominous mountains had already drawn. The air was now clearer and colder, and though still far off, the walls of Mordor were no longer a cloudy menace on the edge of sight, but as grim black towers they frowned across a dismal waste. The marshes were at an end, dying away into dead peats and wide flats of dry, cracked mud. The land ahead rose in long, shallow slopes, barren and pitiless, toward the desert that lay at Sauron's gate. While the grey light lasted, they cowered under a black stone like worms, shrinking lest the winged terror should pass and spy them with its cruel eyes. The remainder of that journey was a shadow of growing fear in which memory could find nothing to rest upon. For 2 more nights they struggled on through the weary, pathless land. The air, as it seemed to them, grew harsh and filled with a bitter reek that caught their breath and parched their mouths. At last, on the 5th morning since they had took the road with Gollum, they halted once more. Before them, dark in the dawn, the great mountains reached up to roofs of smoke and cloud. Out from their feet were flung huge buttresses and broken hills that were now at the nearest scarce a dozen miles away. Frodo looked round in horror. Dreadful as the dead marshes had been, and the arid moors of the Norman lands, more loathsome far was the country that the crawling day now slowly unveiled to his shrinking eyes. Even to the mirror of dead faces some haggard phantom of green spring would come. But here neither spring nor summer would ever come again. Here nothing lived, not even the leprous growths that fed on rottenness. The gasping pools were choked with ash and crawling muds, sickly, white and grey, as if the mountains had vomited the filth of their entrails upon the lands about. High mounds of crushed and powdered rock, great cones of earth, fire-blasted and poison-stained, stood like an obscene graveyard in endless rows, slowly revealed in the reluctant light. They had come to the desolation that lay before Mordor, the lasting monument to the dark labor of its slaves that should endure when all purposes were made void, a land defiled, diseased beyond all healing, unless the great sea should enter in and wash it with oblivion. "I feel sick," said Sam. Frodo did not speak. For a while they stood there like men at the edge of a sleep where nightmare lurks, holding it off, though they know that they can only come to morning through the shadows. The light broadened and hardened. The gasping pits and poisonous mounds grew hideously clear. The sun was up, walking among clouds and long flags of smoke, but even the sunlight was defiled. The hobbits had no welcome for that light, unfriendly it seemed, revealing them in their helplessness, little squeaking ghosts that wandered among the ash heaps of the Dark Lord. Too weary to go further, they sought for some place where they could rest. For a while they sat without speaking under the shadow of a mound of slag, but foul fumes leaked out of it, catching their throats and choking them. Gollum was the first to get up. Sputtering, cursing, he rose, and without a word or glance at the hobbits, he crawled away on all fours. Frodo and Sam crawled after him until they came to a wide, almost circular pit, high banked upon the west. It was cold and dead, and a foul sump of oily, many-coloured ooze lay at its bottom. In this evil hole they cowered, hoping in its shadow to escape the attention of the eye. The day passed slowly. A great thirst troubled them, but they drank only a few drops from their bottles, last filled in the gully which now, as they looked back in, thought to them a place of peace and beauty. The hobbits took it in turn to watch. At first, tired as they were, neither of them could sleep at all, but as the sun, far away, was climbing down into slow-moving clouds, Sam dozed. It was Frodo's turn to be on guard. He lay back on the slope of the pit, but that did not ease the sense of burden that was on him. He looked up at the smoke-streaked sky and saw strange phantoms, dark riding shapes and faces out of the past. He lost count of time, hovering between sleep and waking until forgetfulness came over him. Suddenly Sam woke up thinking that he heard his master calling. It was evening. Frodo could not have called, for he had fallen asleep, and he had slid down nearly to the bottom of the pit. Gollum was beside him. For a moment Sam thought that he was trying to rouse Frodo. Then he saw it was not so. Gollum was talking to himself. Smeagol was holding a debate with some other thought that used the same voice but made it squeak and hiss. A pale light and a green light alternated in his eyes as he spoke.
Smeagol promised,
Was the first thought.
Yes, yes, my precious, came the answer. We promised to save our precious, not to let him have it, never. But it's going to him, yes, nearer every step. What's the hobbit going to do with it, he wonders, yes, he wonders. I don't know, I can't help it. Master's got it, Smeagol promised to help the master. Yes, yes, to help the master of the precious. But if we was master, then we could help ourselves, yes, and still keep promises. But Smeagol said he would be very good. Nice Herbert. He took cruel rope off Smeagol's leg. He speaks nicely to me. Very, very good, eh, my precious? Let's be good, good as fish, sweet one, but to ourselves. Not hurt the nice Herbert, of course, no, no. But the precious holds the promise, the voice of Smeagol objective. Then take it, said the other. And let's hold it ourselves. Then we shall be master. Gollum. Make the other hop. Nice Herbert. Oh, no. Not if it doesn't please us. Still, he's a Baggins, my precious. Yes, a Baggins. We hate Bagginses. Not this Baggins. Yes, every Baggins. All peoples that keep the precious. We must have it. But he'll see, he'll know, he'll take it from us. He sees, he knows, he heard us make silly promises against his orders, yes. Must take it, the rates are searching, must take it. Not for him, no, sweet one. See, my precious, if we has it, then we can escape, even from him, Perhaps we grows very strong, stronger than wraiths. Lord Smeagol, Gollum the Great, the Gollum, eat fish every day, 3 times a day, fresh from the sea. Most precious Gollum, must have it. We wants it. We wants it. We wants it. But there's 2 of them. They're way too quick and kill us, whined Smeagol in a last effort. Not now. Not yet. We wants it, but... And here there was a lull vacant. Not yet, eh? Perhaps not. She might help. She might, yes. No, not that way, wailed Smeagol. Yes, we wants it, we wants it. Each time that the second thought spoke, Gollum's long hand crept out slowly, pawing towards Frodo, and then was drawn back with a jerk as Smeagol's voice spoke again. Finally both arms, with long fingers fletched and twitching, clawed towards his neck. Sam had lain still, fascinated by this debate, but watching every move that Gollum made from under his half-closed eyelids. To his simple mind, ordinary hunger, the desire to eat hobbits, had seemed the chief danger in Gollum. He realized now that it was not so. Gollum was feeling the terrible call of the ring. The Dark Lord was he, of course, but Sam wondered who she was. One of the nasty friends the little wretch had made in his wanderings, he supposed. Then he forgot the point, for things had plainly gone far enough, and were getting dangerous. A great heaviness was in all his limbs, but he roused himself with an effort and sat up. Something warned him to be careful and not reveal that he had overheard the debate. He let out a loud sigh and gave a huge yawn. "What's the time?" he said sleepily. Gollum sent out a long hiss through his forward on all fours and crawling up the bank of the pit. "Nice, hobbits. Nice, Sam," he said. "Sleepy heads, yes, sleepy heads. Leave good Smeagol to watch, but it's evening. Dusk is creeping. Time to go." High time, thought Sam. And time we parted, too. Yet it crossed his mind to wonder if indeed Gollum was not now as dangerous turned loose as kept with them. Curse him. I wish he was choked, he muttered. He stumbled down the bank and roused his master. Strangely enough, Frodo felt refreshed. He had been dreaming. The dark shadow had passed, and a fair vision had visited him in this land of disease. Nothing remained of it in his memory. Yet because of it he felt glad and lighter of heart. His burden was less heavy on him. Gollum welcomed him with dog-like delight. He chuckled and chattered, cracking his long fingers and pawing at Frodo's knees. Frodo smiled at him.
Come, he said, you have guided us well and faithfully. This is the last stage. Bring us to the gate, and then I will not ask you to go further. Bring us to the gate, and you may go where you wish. Only not to our enemies.
To the gate, eh?
Gollum squeaked, seeming surprised and frightened.
To the gate, Master says. Yes, he says so, and good Smeagol does what he asks, or less. But when we get closer, we'll see, perhaps we'll see then. It won't look nice at all. Oh, no, no.
Go on with you, said Sam. Let's get it over. In the falling dusk, they felt... Let's try that again. In the falling dusk, they scrambled out of the pit and slowly threaded their way through the dead land. They had not gone far before they felt once more the fear that had fallen on them when the winged shape swept over the marshes. They halted, cowering on the evil-smelling ground, but they saw nothing in the gloomy evening sky above. And soon the menace passed, high overhead, going maybe on some swift errand from Barad-dûr. After a while Gollum got up and crept forward again, muttering and shaking. About an hour after midnight, the fear fell on them a third time, but now it seemed more remote, as if it were passing far above the clouds, rushing with terrible speed into the west. Gollum, however, was helpless with terror, and was convinced that they were being hunted, that their approach was known.
3 times,
he whispered, or whimpered.
This is their master. We cannot go any further this way now. It's no use, no use.
Pleading and kind words were no longer of any avail. It was not until Frodo commanded him angrily and laid a hand on his sword hilt that Gollum would get up again. Then at last he rose with a snarl and went before him like a beaten dog. So they stumbled on through the weary end of the night, and until the coming of another day of fear they walked in silence with bowed heads, seeing nothing and hearing nothing but the wind hissing in their ears. So that's the end of that chapter. I wanted to, we have the next chapter is the Black Gate is closed. We'll have to get to that next time. But I wanted to talk about Gollum's little dialogue with himself. And especially we see here that the ring is really what's doing this to him. Earlier, I perceived that he was legitimately wanting to be good. And compared it sort of to Sauron at the end of the first age. And that Frodo is even starting to thinking in terms of that he could fix Gollum. But now we see that there, like as I said, there's something greater than that. There's the ring. And he starts to see these visions that with the ring, he could become more powerful. And he's even thinking himself as becoming more powerful than the Nazgul, and think himself as, the Gollum the Great, Lord Smeagol. And of course, these are the same sort of just delusions. So there is no better word for it. They're delusions that went through the mind of Boromir, that went through the mind of Galadriel, that will later go through the mind of Sam. And Boromir, he fell into it hard. But once the ring was sort of removed from that scene, he came to his senses immediately. Galadriel just was too strong. She fought it off. She passed the test, right? Sam, it barely bothers him. You know what I mean? We'll get to that. That's later on. But he has these visions of himself as a great hero, Samwise the Great, right? Turning all of Middle-earth into one big garden. That's what the ring shows him. And what does the ring show Gollum? That he could become stronger than the race, eat fish every day, make the hobbits crawl before him if it pleases them. And that Smeagol part of him is like, well, maybe not do that to Frodo, And it's interesting because the Gollum part of him, the evil part of him, is very seductive. It's like, well, if that's not what you want, then we won't do that, We'll do what you want to do. Just think about it, It's not like, as quick as what was shown in the movie, where it's like, you'll take it for me, for us, So, you could start to see the mind at war with itself idea here, where there really, really is a part beholden to Frodo and has become attached to him. And Tolkien once spoke about this bond that they shared. And Sam even noticed it earlier, that they do share a strong bond. And I talked about it myself, that they are more alike than you would think, that they're pretty much the same guy, except in matters of morality. And Gollum really doesn't follow any sort of morality. He doesn't think about what's right or what's wrong. He only thinks about himself. He's fully selfish, and he's not concerned with what happens to other people. But for the first time in his life, he's a little concerned about what happens with Frodo. And, of course, the Gollum part of him, which is, they're the same person, is aware of this. And is not saying, nah, man, to heck with that guy. Kill him. Let's get the ring. Let's get out of here. Is trying to cajole him like, well, no, we don't have to hurt that one if that's not what you want to do, but we'll take the ring and we'll make Sam crawl around a little bit, If you want to leave Frodo, that's fine. We don't need to do anything to him, But then it's like suddenly like, but maybe we get Shelob involved, right? Maybe we get Shelob involved. Now, a lot of people have pointed out over the years that Gollum and Shelob speaking to each other, communicating in some way, is indicative that they can understand each other. And one's mind really need not boggle of Shelob understanding Smeagol. The real question is, how does Smeagol understand Shelob? Can Shelob speak Westron? Can Shelob speak at all? And I think absolutely yes. Now, in her children are a little different. The spiders of Mirkwood, we learn that they can speak, and they can speak in a language that could be understood if you know the language, and that Bilbo could understand their language when he wore the One Ring, because it gives you the ability to understand the languages of evil creatures. We see this a little bit further on in The Lord of the Rings with orcs and their language, that Frodo is going to be able to understand their language, and Sam, when he wears the ring, is going to be able to understand their language. But Gollum doesn't have the ring. So what this tells us is that Gollum just knows how to speak spider. Like, whatever their language is called, he knows how to speak it. Because he's able to communicate with her, and she's able to communicate with him. But Shelob, does she speak? Maybe. I think that, Ungoliant spoke to Melkor, right? That could have been telepathic. Or it could have just been that the language was something that Melkor himself devised. Because Melkor did come up with languages. They weren't very good languages, but he did come up with languages, which is kind of interesting. Anyway, guys, we went a bit later than I had expected, but when I looked at it, I thought, well, we could either end early, or we could go a little bit late to do one more chapter, and I really wanted to do that chapter, because there's not a lot of lore, not a lot of talk there, just a bit of talk on the psychology of Gollum, and the morality of the situations that we're seeing here. Gollum kind of getting a little taste of morality and a little taste of actually feeling fondness for something that isn't him is sort of really interesting. Of course, he, not counting the ring, of course, he's fond of the ring, but he also hated the ring. But he has that same complicated relationship with Frodo here. He's sitting there and saying, well, the master's nice. The master took the rope off of us. And of course, if Gollum had wanted to press the issue, he would have said, well, who do you think put it on in the first place? Well, Sam put it on, but it was Frodo that told him to do so, just like when Sam took it off, it was Frodo that told him to do so. So he's sort of thinking of him as, hey, he took the rope off of us, but he's not thinking of, well, he put the rope on me too. So there, like I said, there's a lot of complexities here. Anyway, let's go over the schedules here, and then we'll be ending. So I'm going to come over to here, because we are sailing off into the west. And we're going to end the stream. So for those of you who are watching the stream on Twitch, you guys know that I stream every day, and will be live tomorrow afternoon with Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D Remake. And, every day after that with the normal schedule, Dragon Quest, Saturdays, Xenoblade, Sundays, Mega Man, Mondays, Street Fighter, Tuesday is, what is Tuesday? Hollow Knight, and Wednesday is Power Wash Simulator 2. Next Thursday, for those of you watching on YouTube, this is important. Next Thursday is the 18th, and we will not have a stream. We will have a stream on Twitch. We're going to have the List Critics, but we will not have a stream on YouTube. However, 2 weeks is Christmas Day. And I talked about this on a post, but let's talk about it now. I'm going to be doing a special Christmas evening stream, normal time 7:30, where I will be reading J.R.R. Tolkien's Letters from Father Christmas. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this book, it's a short thing, and every year Tolkien would sit there and write letters from Santa Claus, or Father Christmas as he's called in the United Kingdom, to his children. Because his children would write to Father Christmas, and they would say, these are the things I want, and how is Mrs. Claus, and all this stuff, right? And then he had a handwriting for Santa Claus, for Father Christmas and everything, and he would write back to his own children. And the Letters from Father Christmas, the book was edited by his daughter Priscilla. It's really, really cool to see the sort of imaginations, and a lot of it was like, this is an excuse as to why you don't get the exact thing you want, or you didn't get all the things you wanted because, the elves lost it or the polar bear ate it and that kind of thing. It's a really cute little book. We're going to read that. It won't be a very long stream because, Christmas Day and all that, but that's what's going to be happening on December 25th. A week from then is New Year's Day, January the 1st, and that's when we will have the Council of Tolkien. So do look forward to that as well with Matt and Sid. And let me set up a raid for those of you watching on Twitch. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, the live will end shortly. For those of you watching on Twitch, I'll be taking you along with me to somebody else's stream. And that person is going to be... Who is it going to be? Oh, dear. You know what? Let's go hang out with Shiny Mudkip. She's watching the Game Awards. That could be kind of amusing, and well, that's loud. Maybe you see some trailers, or in the morning when I do the Dragon Quest stream. By the way, we'll be looking over the winners of the Game Awards and see what I predicted that was correct and what I predicted that was incorrect. I usually have about an 80% success rate there. Let me give you guys a raid call here. I see a Capcom logo. Okay. There is your raid call for Twitch. I will see you guys over there. I will see you guys on Discord. I think we're looking at a new Mega Man game right now. We'll see you guys tomorrow. We'll see you guys just around. Here we go. And thank you for coming by, kids.